Okay, we're going to start covering El Gran Capitan to follow up in the same period, essentially. This is the later part of the Italian wars out of, well, the later part of the game centered in Italia in the Tento Monta that I just played. So it felt like a good transition. I'm set up for the introductory scenario, and we're going to really kind of work our way through this. This is Europa Simulations. I don't know how they... Europa Simulazione. An Italian company that I've had my eye on. I've gotten a few of their games. Trying to think. I feel like outside of topic, because I got the first game in this series using very much the same rules. Not quite. This uses a different scale, for example. All is Lost Save Honor, which covered a later portion of the Italian wars. But this is covering the Neapolitan campaign that was earlier on in that Tento Monta period. And it was a very intriguing system. And the idea of an operational game on this subject matter, even though I had kind of mixed feelings about the prior game, although I think it is one of the cooler things they've done, it sort of was a must-buy, you know. It was a little weirded out. So a couple of their other games I've been less enthusiastic about, and I know I don't sound too enthusiastic about this. I just played Piacenza, which... or I played it not long ago, which had its issues. This system is designed with a heavy drawing on, yeah, there I go with my uhs and uhs. Fucking annoying, right? Well, I don't know how to stop it. A heavy drawing on Zucker's Napoleonic series. The operational games from that series, of which, you know, he's wandered all over Zucker's wandered all over the place, but in terms of, like, you know, going from things like the really awesome Napoleon at Bay that I really, really love, but he's presented the rules in different formats, etc. He's presented the games in different formats. When you look at Struggle of Nations with its tiny little hexes, which I think is actually probably the coolest of the bunch, except for Avalon Hill's crappy production of it, which the rules were horrible and the map is one that breaks into little pieces. One of the few games I need a plexiglass for. But this takes things to a much, much deeper level in, especially, well, the first game in the series hit you with everything. This one, they've made the combat optional, not combat in general. There's basically two ways to handle combat. You can handle it with a simplified version or with the version from the original game for the major battles. Smaller battles are all going to be handled the same way. The major battles, though, have a more detailed setup. Like in the Zucker games, you're going to have cards which represent the strength of units on them. You can have subordinate commanders to a commander. Although, for the most part, you're going to have one Capitano General who is able to command other Capitans. So you're not going to have, a la the Zucker games, you know, marshals here, there, and everywhere commanding large forces. You might have moderate or smaller forces operating outside, but for the most part, the army is going to be gathered in a large section. And this initial scenario is going to be ousting the Turks from Otranto. Very small. It only uses the Otranto region itself. And take a look at some of the counters, etc., that we have here. The dice, I love the dice. These are the kind of dice that I like. They will get stolen. But yeah, and absolutely I would be using dice of this type and quality with this game because the map is so beautiful. Unfortunately, I'm finding it a little difficult to cope with. It doesn't have a key, but I think we can kind of figure things out without one, but that's kind of problematic. What else do we have? The rulebook, which actually contains the scenarios as well, and also has... Hey, there's an index. Awesome. By the way, the rulebook is real paper this time. In All Is Lost Save Honor, they gave kind of one of those glossy paper rulebooks. I don't like those as much. You can't write corrections or notes in them easily. Here you can just pencil stuff in. In addition to the scenarios, there's a what-if scenario, which I don't know if we'll play, and some design notes, relatively limited in terms of design notes, but especially for something that's, kind of innovative, but, the first game was more so. This is very similar. One of the really intriguing things about the design notes that I saw, first of all, they're real design notes. They tell you the difference between this game and the previous one and why choices were made, and then a fair amount of effort on the map design, which, I'm hoping Nicola is using the work that he did on this, because one of the things that he's got, which is information on the size of the various settlements at this time, he was unable to find directly and had to kind of sleuth it, I don't know, use logic along with some primary sources that he had access to be able to come up with what those values are. And I got to tell you, that sounds like, at the very least, a PhD thesis in terms of what he could produce from that. So, yeah, that I don't know if he's actually works as a historian, or anything, but it seems like there's definitely a synergy between what he had to do to figure out some of the information for this game and what is actually publishable, probably. You got some player aids here. Now, this one is the most problematic. Let me move these markers off. This one gives you, information you need, turn record track, whatever, a weather table. And most importantly is probably the administrative points track. It's the one place where you're going to keep track of the points. I would rather this be on the map, to tell you the truth. Not the whole chart, just this one thing, because it's so necessary, whereas the rest of this is kind of, you move it once per turn, But on the back of this thing where you're going to have markers moving and whatnot, and you wouldn't have too many important markers, like everything, I don't know. The administrative point track really is necessary for the game. Maybe the month track would be nice too, and then the rest of it is kind of unimportant. But on the other side of it, you have this flow chart and play aid for the major battles, and that's a really useful thing for the major battles. They're complex, and having the sequence of play on a nice little simple thing would be useful. On the other hand, they're going to be fairly rare, I think. So I can mark down what I got, or obviously I could make a photocopy, but I don't like doing that. This is to handle the actual major battles and handle where all the forces are and what condition they're in. I don't know what this is. Battle roster. think this is for the simple game, but I don't know why there's so many fortresses here. Not sure. We'll find out. I've read the rules. I just read them, but, you know, things don't always stick very well. Here's a couple of setups for 2 of the scenarios. There isn't one for everything, but like this scenario was pretty small. It was fairly easy to figure out what all the units were once I had them all sorted. We got the various charts for the game here, discipline checks, effects of pursuit, the actual combat table. This is used for, you know, all the combats, including in the major battles. It's just in the major battles you'll be doing more than one role. An administrative points table. This is the administrative points is really, you know, based on the Zucker concept, where you're going to be generating points based on the distance of your commander to your supply source, basically, and they get marked on this track, and then you do things with them. You give out commands, whatever, which are different from the way that they are in the Zucker system. In the Zucker system, it's kind of like, I'm ordering you to move, right? You spend points to ensure that somebody's able to move. In this, instead, you spend points to give them a command chit, and you kind of have to give everybody a command chit. But if people don't have action points available, there are mechanisms for handling that. And then a list of the different orders and how they work, including the costs of the orders based on the size of the force. This is used for, I don't remember what. Probably interception or something along those lines. Attrition, which takes effect in some places. This is for the major battles, the tactical options that you can pick. You're going to be given, you're going to be able to generate a certain number of these for each battle, and you assign them to the different corps commanders. It looks like we got a lot of charts here, because it's one of each. So now these are specific different types of attacks that come off those counters. And then the terrain effects chart. Hey, we got the key. Okay, cool. I didn't see this before. So we got towns. We got fortified towns, which will have a wall around them. Fortified cities. Somewhere or another we should have just castles, right? I'm not sure about that. I think those are fortified towns, these things. It's really hard to read this. Again, the imagery is not trivial. Yeah, that's a fortified town. The town is just like, actually, yeah, this is a town. This is a fortified town with the wall around it. It's kind of hard to deal with, to view. I'm probably going to need to switch my glasses for this. How different types of units and how they work in different things. What you can do with your administrative points. I knew this existed. I didn't know where it was. A list of all the different types of units so that you can see by the imagery. And for units, you're going to have some different information. We'll get into that, whether they have firearms and stuff like that, because this is an early period. We're looking in, right around the turn of the 16th century, or turned into the 16th century, 15th to 16th, whatever. The rule book itself. So far it seems understandable. I had some places where I had hitches getting into it, even though I've played this, the system before. I don't remember it very well. In fact, I kind of looked at this and said, whoa, I remember the operational, the action point cost, the Zucker mechanisms being in play in the other one. I remembered a complex combat system, but it didn't feel like it aligned with this one. I went down and looked, and yeah, they're basically the same system. So at least there's that. But yeah, it's been a long, long time since I read those rules, and I don't really remember, what they were like. But for these, I found some wording choices and some of it was very obvious this is not written by someone, who's a native English speaker. On the other hand, it's not like replete with mistakes or anything like that. It's just there's some odd choices. Kind of reminds me of, other than the not being replete with mistakes, with some of the ways things are written in the AWE games, where it's like, well, that's a really odd way to state that. And in some cases, there's like some grammatical errors or whatever, or just really odd constructions. Yeah. Do we have any playtesters in here? We have a very limited set of playtesters listed, which is worrisome. We shall see. And I guess let's dive into the rules. Let me get better settled. I know I'm going to have to, I know I'm going to have to hit the pause a couple of times and paste this together, so there's no worry with that. All right, I do want to talk a couple of things. First, about the quality of the map. I mean, it's very pretty, but it's kind of a smooth quality. It's not obvious immediately. It might look like it should be that really, really wonderful texture. It's not. It's just a normal map. Not glossy. At least there's that. The quality of the cards is low. I think it was in the first set as well. I mean, they're not terrible. They're functional and everything. And I'm not going to complain about them. But in this day and age, we're all used to like playing card quality, and these kind of stick together. They're really just like a thin stock. No worries there. It's just, I thought I should point that out. And I do find the counters a little difficult to discern and to read them completely. They have a lot of busyness in them and colors and whatnot. Might be aided when I get my other glasses on. All right. This is a larger scale area than covered in the original game, and everything has been scaled to kind of match that in terms of movement speeds and whatnot. Fortresses are defined as fortified towns or fortified cities. A regular town is not a fortress. Any named location with an anchor symbol will be a port. Full sea hex sides. I don't know what's up with that, but I'm assuming they're just, yeah, they're impassable. Yeah. State cards and boxes. Okay, I don't know about this. For each state in the Kingdom of Naples, a state card is printed on the map to contain whatever barons are there. We're not going to be dealing with that in this first little scenario, but in the later ones, it's going to be more about conquering territories and all that. This is really to just see the core mechanisms and the combat system. Double and single square boxes, these I guess, to be used only in certain scenarios are connected to each state territory. And we'll see how those operate within the scenarios. The playing pieces, they give you the nationality by color on them. We have the sample unit, so you've got a reliability class. Wow, this is really weird because that looks like movement allowances in the same place. Okay, I think, see, this is weird. There's like a thin gray line going from here to here. I think it's supposed to go up here. So the movement allowance should be this number to the right, the maximum strength of the unit, which is how many strength points it can hold on one of these cards, okay? So like if this takes a hit, it might go down to a 3. And then if you could get replacements for it, you could bring it back up. And then it's got a quality in the shield up here. The nationality is indicated by the flag and the color and whatnot. The front side is the unit in good order. we really shouldn't be using an artillery unit for this. The backside is its demoralized version, or is it disordered? I know they have both. Okay, if a combat unit has a red maximum strength, it has firepower or firearms, and it'll be able to use the special rules for firearms, which I think only apply in the major battles. The troop quality is the morale level, and you want that, I think, high. Reliability class is the willingness to respect the contract for war in relation to the wages they receive. V is very, so this is how likely they are to kind of be a problem. So V is very sensitive, normal, reliable. If military units are on a pale yellow background, the engineer is the siege artillery. They're auxiliary units and have special rules. The back of the unit is demoralized, which will have a reduced movement allowance. It will not have a reduced troop number. And you'll see it doesn't have a quality either. The quality is gone. Its quality is demoralized. It does keep its reliability, though. I'm having troubles. These are going to be a pain. I'm used to, you know, the large cards that Zucker's games usually come up with that have all the leaders on them. But those are usually for one campaign, right? So you can have everybody on it. Here, each of these is back printed on the other side, so you can play the multiple different scenarios that are present, which is, I think, cooler, but it does make these move around a little bit. Some combat units have counterpart counters with lower or higher maximum strength. I've got some over here. These are substitute units. You're allowed to divide a larger unit into those substitutes. So for example, here I have 235 infantry, which I could break, I guess, one of these 8.5s into these two. It doesn't break evenly, so I'd have to like take some losses or abandon some troops if that were the case. Combat units can be replaced by substitute units whose total SP are equal to the original units if they're available. And then you're allowed to reform them into a larger unit again if it matches the same type and quality. Basically, I have, as the Aragonese, two of these that I could conceivably replace one of these guys with if I wanted more flexibility in terms of deployment. Probably not going to happen in this scenario. Much odder. Oh, there's no substitutes for the Turks. Okay. Capitanos. Okay. So I'll pick this guy up. This is a sample of actually, I think he's a Gran Capitano, but I'm not sure. He's a Capitano. They relate to each of the cards. If you have subordinates, like these minor captains here, they have their own cards and are like essentially contained and commanded by the higher ranking Gran Capitano. So the initiative is going to be in the lower left side. Possible bonus point, very similar to Zucker, a little star that indicates you're going to be better at combat and other stuff. Special features. These are going to be capabilities that like these leaders have that are just outside of like the star or the numbers that are there. And then a rank, which I believe is how many units you can have under your command. You use the cards to track the actual strength of the troops and any subordinates that are there. You could have unemployed Capitani with you as well, which don't have any real effect, but they're there if they need to be promoted or something. Barons. So I've got barons over here. They're going to work kind of like Capitani. They're able to operate as independent units or be incorporated into a Capitani's force as combat units. So it's kind of a weird situation between them. I think their ratings are the same as combat units. We don't really have it here. Okay. The information on the Capitanos should be concealed from your opponent. All the information on it, the troops there, the strength, everything. That's all hidden. The Capitani starting the scenario on the map may be set up with their front side down. Okay. So we have not done that. Well, we wouldn't do that. Let me grab one to show you. For some reason, I haven't put Alfonso on. So they show the nationality of the unit, so you don't know exactly what you're facing. Once that's revealed, which is, I think, by coming into contact, at the beginning of combat and attrition, if in the same hex, yeah, that's basically contact. They remain visible for the rest of the game. So once you come into engagement with the enemy, for the rest of the scenario, you know where that particular officer is. Which is a little weird. Die roll results of attrition, combat, or discipline table, and their effects are visible to the opposing side. Yeah, okay. All right, I am going to break a bit here. I know I'm stumbling through these. They didn't stick very well in my head. I've got a vague idea, or I've got a fair idea of the flow, but yeah, we are kind of struggling our way through in a way that, I don't know, I'm ashamed of, but whatever. Oh, they're sheep. These are going to influence your action points in certain scenarios. Positive in the sense that, like, you know, you're getting resource. The action points are kind of like money in this, in a way that they aren't in the Zucker games. So having access to sheep is going to give you money. It's not going to, like, wear your troops out from, like, using them. Well, it's almost raid time. By the way, it's like Monday. And it's just too overcast for me to convince myself to do anything valuable. Might as well get a little bit more done, because I really don't want to play raid. Okay. The sequence of play. You check the weather. Administrative segment. On the yellow turns, so not, looks like every other. Looks like every other. The Capitani General get admin points based on their supply status, and then all the orders are removed, and they're going to have to generate new ones. On scheduled turns, indicated by sheep, let's get those counters off there and take a look at this. Boop, 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 boop. Bah. The administrative points that are generated by the sheep are going to come to the players who control all the sheep, I think. You have to have them all to get it. Those with a crown, baronial units are replaced. And then you declare where your active supply source is. And then you hit an organization segment where you can activate or deactivate minor capitani. They don't add a lot, right? But they do add a little bit of capacity to your force. However, splitting things into core is kind of iffy, so I'm not even sure I want those. I kind of like the idea of one big core, but I don't know which works better in the major battles, assuming one happens, which isn't guaranteed in this scenario. You can shift combat units between Capitani in the same space. including barons, and subordinates and unemployed and baronial forces can be moved about on the cards of people who are in the same space. And you can transfer strength points from one combat unit to the other if they're in the same hex and of the same nationality, type, quality, and reliability. And you can also use your substitutes to break down or regroup units. Then you have to issue your orders. Or you may issue orders. So here's the thing. On the yellow turns, you get new action points, and all the orders are removed. And so you have to issue orders to everybody on those. But on the non-yellow turns, you're able to spend action points to issue different orders to a unit. Okay, activation. All reinforcements available show up where they're supposed to. And then, beginning with the first player, you alternate activating friendly barons on the map one at a time. You roll a die, subtracting the result from the indicated baron's initiative rating. This may be modified by whatever his order is or any enemy forces. If it's already been activated this turn, it'll get a -1 to its initiative. And you're going to have these counters which indicate, hey, I've done one activation, hey, I've done two activations. Once you've done two activations, that unit can't be used again on a given turn. The second activation is basically a forced march. You'll see that. The activated baron performs his actions. An activation marker is placed on or near the baron marker of the value indicating how many he's undertaken. If this is his second activation, he makes an attrition check. Again, remember, it's like a forced march. This process will end when one player's baron forces are all finished, or if a player declines to activate any more barons. Then the other player can make a first activation with any remaining barons. And this is a mechanism you're going to see also with the Capitani. Basically, we alternate back and forth taking turns, but if I pass, you are guaranteed your first march or your first activation with each of your units, but not a forced march type thing. The other player, they can make one activation. Yeah, that was it. Okay, then we go to Capitani, and it's basically the same thing as, well, it says note that it's different between Capitani and barons, but it's very similar. Both players indicate one friendly Capitani on the map they wish to activate. The first player indicates first in the first activation of each turn. So we each point at a Capitani. This is where it gets different. Each player rolls a die, subtracting the result from the indicated Capitani's initiative rating. The Capitano's initiative rating may be modified by his order or enemy forces in the same hex. If it's already been activated, it has an additional -1 to its initiative. The player getting the higher result determines which of the two selected Capitani is going to activate. By the way, the barons is new. I don't think they were in the first version, the first game of the series. The activated Capitano performs his actions. An activation marker is placed on him with a value corresponding to how many activations he's undertaken. If it's his second one, he makes an attrition check. And then we go back. The player who has just terminated the activation will indicate first his next Capitano. This will happen until one player, you'll keep, so you're not alternating here. You're rolling an initiative check, right? We each select a Capitani we want, or a Capitano that we want to activate. We make an initiative check. The person who wins the initiative gets to choose which of those two Capitano gets to activate. And then that activation takes place. And then we each again select one and make another roll, okay? But eventually someone will all be finished or decline to activate any more Capitani. At that point, the other player can make an activation with any that haven't gone yet. Same kind of situation as it was with the barons there. Then we hit a joint consolidation. You can consolidate any uncontested hexes that have two or more friendly, you must actually, that have two or more friendly capitani, or one capitano with one or more barons in them on the map, so that only one capitano counter occupies each hex. You may end up overstacked here and lose units. Capitani in the same hex as their capitano general are removed from the map and placed on the capitano general's card in the appropriate box, and we have that here with the two minor captains here. Then we go to combat and attrition. Capitani in a contested hex, i.e. you're in the same space. Name visible, reveal the composition of their forces. Why did they say name visible? I think that would happen already. Then battles are resolved. And then once again, you consolidate any multi-force hexes according to before. Now remember, in uncontested hexes, you do not consolidate before battle. And this is important because it's hard to coordinate units. If two units go into a single hex, one of them is going to fight the battle. Or, okay, it's possible that we might have multiple battle situations. But basically, you're not able to bring together forces easily for a battle. What happens next? Remove disruption and opposed river crossing markers after that. And then if it's a hostile region, a barren land, or a contested hex, or if you're under siege, you have to make an attrition check. Then we see whether or not somebody won and move the game turn marker forward. It is raid time. My battery's out. I know I wasn't up here long, but it seems like a good time to stop. That's the core of the game. Now, how do you actually do the things? Well, yeah, we're going to dig in, and it's going to take way too long and everything. But at this point, I think you kind of know enough to know how the activations are going to go and whatever. And if you're not really interested in all the details, this is probably a good place to bop off. All right, weather's a simple die roll on this chart. It gives you a type. And the effects, anything except fair is going to be a +1 on the attrition table. Rain is going to add a movement point on moving across bridges. Oh, we have a terrain effects chart somewhere. Let's see. Bridges already cost an extra 0.5 movement points to cross. And they just look like, I guess, a road going across a river. However that's drawn. You know, there's different kinds of roads here, primary road and secondary roads. With primary roads being a little cheaper to move on at half movement, whereas secondaries just make it a 1 movement point. Mud subtracts 1 from the movement allowance of each combat unit. Shifts the column to the right when rolling on administrative points, so you can do less those turns as well. Fair and heat have no effect on combat. Rain subtracts 1 from artillery fire die rolls. Infantry units can't use firearms. These are really early firearms, things like matchlocks and stuff. So yeah. They were very finicky. You simply can't use, so on the assault table, you won't get the modifier, and if you're playing with the tactical options, the full major battle rules, optional rules, you can't use them. And also you subtract 1 from the combat rolls on the assault table. Now that affects both sides, actually, because you're going to be rolling against each other on the assault table. And mud subtracts 1 from artillery fire and cav charges, and subtracts 1 from any combat roll on the AST. There will be multiple combat rolls during major battles. Leadership, because you're going to be, before I get into that, I kind of want to give my insight as I paw through all these player aids. You're going to be facing each other off in little fights. And no, it's not like all the Vanguard against all the Vanguard. It's core by core attacks. We'll look into that a little later. But leadership. Before any activity can take place in administrative, the troops have to be constituted into forces. Capitani make this possible by having the actual troops on their card. A Capitano can command a number of combat units equal to his rank, plus any number of auxiliary units. These guys over here, I've got them in the unemployed box just because there's not a lot of room on the card. But yeah, so your rank number, which is the right-hand number, is how many troops you can command. Now, I could conceivably have everything under Alfonso instead of splitting it into the minors, which I don't know which is better, to tell you the truth, because those minors become core in the major combat or major battles. Okay. The Capitano Generale. You might have more than one of these, but in generale, there's only one. It's a Capitano who may command other Capitani, who in turn command military units. Capitani that are under command of a Capitano General are subordinates and are put in the subordinate box, as I have over here. A Capitano General can command any number of Capitani in addition to a number of combat units equal to his rank, plus any number of auxiliary units. Most scenarios have a single Capitani General listed. Others can be created through various means. Candidate Capitani Generale. The Capitano in play whose rank is higher than any other of his army is the Capitano General of the army. And that's going to be obvious here where I have a 5 and there's a couple of 2s. But no Capitano is allowed, may be subordinate to another Capitano with a lower rank. During a consolidation segment, if 2 Capitani Generali of the same army are in the same uncontested hex, the one with the lower rank immediately and permanently loses his status as a Capitano General. If the ranks are equal, you select randomly one of them to be the new Capitano Generale. If they're of different armies belonging to the same coalition, the forces will consolidate, but the Capitani Generali will maintain their status. Scenario instructions will say which may lead the forces in these cases. The Primo Capitano. This is the Capitano commanding any given force. This may be the Capitano Generale or not, and he's always deployed on the map. A Capitano without any subordinate Capitani or combat units at the beginning of an activation phase is unemployed. After an activation of a friendly Primo Capitano, up to 2 unemployed Capitani of the same side already on the map may move up to 9 movement points. Unemployed Capitani need no orders, and they can move only once in an activation phase. Well, we can mark that with those little things. They have a lot of movement, but they don't get to force march, so not as much as like a cav-only force. The active player must immediately inform the inactive player that he's moving unemployed Capitano when he does so. They cannot cut lines of communication. They may not take command of a force until the next command phase, unless a Capitano is eliminated, in which case they might get promoted to command. Unemployed Capitani may move and retreat as part of a force they're stacked with. They're not subordinate, and they may accompany any Primo Capitano, not only a Capitano General. Now you'll notice there's space for subordinates on all leaders. Well, not on the minor leaders, but I don't know. Actually, there is space. Yeah, the shield is there. That's the shield, not some kind of thing saying no. Yeah, and that's a place you can put, well, there's actually an unemployed space as well. So I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't seem to me like a minor would be likely to have subordinates. But anyway, Let's keep going. They're not subordinate, so they may accompany any primo capitano, and they can be used to replace an eliminated capitano or to detach a new force. However, a capitano generale cannot be present in a force as an unemployed capitano. Minor capitani are generic ones with ratings of 1-2, which can be used just like any other capitani. They may be voluntarily activated or deactivated, returning available for future use. During command phase, they can be activated when a capitano is eliminated as a result of combat, and they may be activated only if available in the initial setup, as noted in the scenario instructions. They can be activated from any kind of force, minor or major. We have a lot of paragraph numbers, which is very helpful. For the most part, I think these rules do a good job of referencing stuff. They tell you to go to paragraph 5.1, and it's not a huge space. Just something, I was facing a GMT rule set recently with Tanto Monta, and I'm so sick of you give me a number and I've got 2 pages of rules associated with that number. You could do a lot better. This one does. Elimination of capitani. Captured ones are removed from the game. A capitano may be captured under one of 3 different circumstances: when all of the force SPs are removed as a result of combat or pursuit, when an enemy force, which includes cav, enters the hex of an unemployed one. In order to avoid capture, the owning player must roll a die less than or equal to the capitano's unmodified initiative rating. If he avoids capture, he may move as he would in a retreat. And again, just a lot of good references everywhere. Yeah, it takes up a little bit of space, but these guys really understand how to do rolls, I think. When a combat result asks for a capitano elimination check. Okay. Elimination check. These can be results of combat. When required, roll a die. He's eliminated on a roll of less than or equal to 2. If he's eliminated, a subordinate units become subordinate to other eligible capitani. First, unemployed capitani in the force, then minor capitani, which can be created immediately for the task if available in the scenario instructions, or other subordinate capitani. If there's no capitani, yeah, I guess it says capitano, but in the force eligible to command a unit subordinate to the eliminated capitano, the subordinate unit is also eliminated. Okay. There is one thing that I've got as a question here, which is it sounds like minor capitani can be eliminated, and I'm not sure that makes sense. Unless it states specifically that that's the case, I'm probably going to disregard that implication. As long as you have the minor capitani in the scenario, they can suffer results that would eliminate them, but still come back. Otherwise, I'm a little disturbed because it feels more like they're not named or anything. So and they can pop up anywhere. So it's not like there's something that's moving around on the map that should be as limited. They still would be limited though by the number that you have. Constraints for major battles. During a major battle, if a capitano is eliminated as a result of a check, his subordinate units may be reallocated only according to priorities 1 and 2, unemployed in the force or a minor, not other subordinate capitani. Yeah, so you can't shift the troops to another force, to another corps. You have to maintain that core structure, but let's keep going. Major battle optional rule 01.1. That's O for option. Regardless of the location of the unit and that of the receiving capitano, vanguard, main body, or rear guard. Yeah. The unemployed or minor capitani are moved in place of the eliminated capitano, arranging subordinate units to form a new corps. Yeah, you're actually forming the same corps and just putting a different commander in place. Okay. Capitani generali elimination. When the Capitano Generale is eliminated as a result of combat, the Capitano, never a minor one, with the highest rank in the same force is promoted to Capitano Generale. If more Capitani share the highest rank, select one randomly unless the scenario specifies otherwise. The promoted Capitano Generale may be one in addition to that with the highest rank in play for that army. But there had to already be a Capitano Generale in that space. So when a Capitano Generale is eliminated, first promote another Capitano in the force as the new Capitano Generale, then check all other Capitani in the same army to see if another one must be promoted also to Capitano. Okay, yeah, so this is important. If I have a Capitano Generale with subordinates to him, and there's a higher ranked officer in charge of another force, my subordinate, my highest ranked subordinate in my force gets promoted to Capitano Generale, and the highest ranked officer on the board gets promoted. Just a special situation in which, in a case that'll cause two Capitani Generale to be created at the same time. There can only be one Capitano acting as Capitano Generale per force, but several per army. Yeah, but there's usually only supposed to be one. But when the Capitano Generale is eliminated because all his force SPs are removed, as to combat or pursuit, all of his APs are lost, and half this amount is transferred to the opposing side, basically looting. Again, remember those APs. So those APs in the Zucker game are not really like wagons of resources particularly, but they're treated a lot more like it here, like for whatever reason. Now, they are kind of, because they're still dependent on supply lines and everything. It's just, they're more concretely real wagons in this game. When a Capitano, yeah, okay. Consequences of elimination of a Capitano. When a Primo Capitano, whether or not the Generale, of a force is eliminated, the force immediately receives a stand or garrison order, which substitutes for its current order. The force may not attack until the next combat and attrition phase. Note that the force may be attacked, though. All right, I need to do something about my notes. Capitanos have a bonus star, a little yellow star. This will be added or subtracted when rolling on the assault table. Subtracted if it's the force defending. The Primo Capitano's leadership bonus is added to the pursuit die roll. The bonus point affects discipline and recovery by subtracting from the discipline table, and it is subtracted from the attrition table. I think they all only have at most one star. Same as Zucker, actually. Leadership special features. There are a bunch of these. Remember, they're the letters. We don't have any here, but they're letters on the side of the Capitano. I could find someone with one, maybe. It's kind of a pain to look. Yeah, the minor Capitanos have a letter there too, but that's just their name. Yeah, I'm having trouble seeing one. There's one, Cordoba, has an L, which is, of course, a very good one. Okay. Strategic ability, L. No APs spent to issue an order to a new force which is created by the force whose Primo Capitano has the strategic ability. No APs are spent. Subsequently, the newly created force will have to pay for orders as other forces. As an exception to standard rules, Capitano General with Strategic can consolidate with other friendly forces also in the contested hex, except besieged forces just before the battle resolution. It allows the coordination that I said you couldn't normally do. Furthermore, a Capitano with Strategic ability always uses non-affecting line on the assault table when attacking and does not place a no-move marker on his force after winning a major battle. All big bonuses, to be honest. Okay, Impetuoso, probably not so good. As a subordinate leader or a dropped-off force, if a Capitano has the impetuosity feature, its force must include at least one SP of heavy cav gendarme unit, if any of them are available. A force containing a leader with I must do at least one charge during every major battle. During a major battle, if cavalry units are present in the force, this Capitano must command at least one of them. Within reason, which is to say if there's two leaders with impetuosity and only one cav, they don't both have to command it. On major battles, the leader must select and use the cav charge tactical option as his first option during a major battle whenever possible. Siege, S. During the siege combat, if a Capitano with siege ability is in the firing force when executing artillery fire, the owner adds 1 to the artillery fire die roll. If he's in the besieged force, he subtracts 1 from the enemies. Okay, but different is artillery ability. Artillery SPs can always be included in the odds determination of the assault table if the Capitano with the artillery ability is involved in the assault. This is also true for major battles. Artillery units fire and then are calculated in the odds determination as well. Major battle rule. During a major battle, if a Capitano with the artillery ability plays an artillery chit, he may fire an unlimited number of rounds of fire, provided that no more than 1 round of fire is fired per battle round. Normally, you're limited to 2. And then you have to put some other chit down. Cavalry. The Capitano, Cavaliere, is a chivalrous hero. It's going to be Bayard when he shows up. Once per battle, he may convert an F result on the discipline table to a P result, fail to pass, for 1 combat unit. He may never attack any enemy force, though, with a retreat order, because that would be unchivalrous. And Tempo Reggiatore. This Capitano is indecisive. The cost in administration points to issue an attack order to him is augmented by 1. All right, defining a force. A force is 1 Capitano in 1 hex on the map and at least 1 combat unit on that Capitano's card. More than 1 Capitano can be in a force, but he must be subordinate to the Capitano General or be unemployed. If more than 1 Capitano is in a force, combat units may be transferred among the Capitano cards during the command phase. Forces whose primo Capitano is a Capitano Generale are called major forces. All others are minor forces. Minor forces pay 1 AP for maneuver and attack orders. Exception. Minor forces composed solely of light cavalry, composed of 1 SP of any type, or baronial forces pay 0 for orders. Baronial forces are a special kind of minor force. Multi-force hex. More than 1 friendly force can end movement in the same hex under the following circumstances. Friendly primi capitani are moved into the same hex for the purpose of combining them into a single force. In this case, a Capitano Generale must be present in any force in order to command the whole force. Forces are moved into a hex containing enemy forces. The hex becomes contested and combat will follow. During the command phase, subordinate Capitani may be removed from the Capitano Generale's card and placed on the game map. The instant these are put on the game map, they constitute new forces and are no longer subordinate. During the command phase, only unemployed Capitani occupying the same hex as a primo Capitano may be assigned combat units. These new primi Capitani are placed on the game map, and at this moment on, they constitute new forces. Baron units, when they enter a hex with a friendly Capitano who has not yet depleted his command capacity, or vice versa, a Capitano enters a hex with a Baron, will consolidate the Baron into their own force as just a regular unit, basically. Creation of a force during movement. A force is normally defined during command phase, but a Capitano Generale may drop off a subordinate Capitano at any time during his activation in any hex passed through by the Capitano Generale. This must be done, however, at the instant the Capitano Generale passes through the hex. To do so, simply remove the subordinate from the card and place it on the map. The new force may not continue moving and must remain in the drop-off hex. The new force will immediately be issued an order and will inherit the activation marker of the same value as the parent force, i.e. if they've already moved, well, they will have already moved at least once and maybe twice. This may be the second movement. A force must stop moving when any unit in the force runs out of movement points unless it has been dropped off. Thus, a Capitano Generale can march with a mixed force of infantry cav, drop off a subordinate with the infantry, and continue moving with the cavalry. A force being dropped off still determines its attrition with the rest of the force, and the number of SPs is the number that started the move. Supply sources. Okay, here we're getting into the admin section. Eligible supply sources are listed in each scenario and may be city or port hexes not owned by the enemy side. There are generally several possible supply source hexes for each army. The supply source marker designates which one is the supply source is active at any time for a given army. The Turks, so this is the only supply source for Naples. The Turks are going to have another supply source, I believe, at Brindisi. I don't know if they own it. I haven't, I got to the setup, but I didn't go too far into the scenario. The active supply source can be changed to another supply source hex, and we mark active by putting this marker on it. Down there at Otranto, there's another one for the Turks. During the administrative segment of a turn, flip the supply source marker over to signify the process begun. During the next administrative segment, the supply source marker may be flipped over at any eligible supply source hex. When the supply source marker shows the changing side, no force of the corresponding army may trace a valid line of communication to that source, nor receive any administrative points from it. If the active supply source hex is occupied by an enemy force, and this is actually why I think it's important that every other turn is a yellow turn, because you can continue with the same orders while you're changing supply source if you time it right. It makes things a little, it's going to be something that's a little gamey, right? Like every other month you get administrative points, and every other month you have to issue orders because all your orders get wiped out. But if you time your moves right in terms of switching the supply source, it can only be done every other month though, and it's not like, what ends up happening is you end up getting APs, which is a big deal. You'll see that in a bit. But anyway, while the supply source marker shows the changing side, no force, okay. Capture. If the active supply source hex is occupied by an enemy force, unless the hex is contested, the active supply source marker is removed from play. While the supply source marker is out of play, the army suffers the same effects as under changing. A supply source marker may be returned to play at any eligible supply source during the admin segment of the second turn after the turn of removal. So this is a worse thing than moving it. Put the supply source marker two turns ahead. And you can return a supply source marker in play to play in a hex adjacent to an enemy unit, though. Line of communication is two segments. The first segment runs from the active supply source along a connected line of roads. The second segment runs from the road cross-country to the receiving force. The first segment can be of unlimited length. The longer it is, the less admin points you get. The length of the second segment is limited to 2 hexes, excluding the road and including the force. Apart from the last 2 hexes, the line of communication may not depart from roads. An LOC may not be traced through enemy forces. It may be traced into but not through a contested hex with limitations. An LOC or a command path may not be traced through fortresses owned by the enemy side. An LOC may never be traced through impassable hex sides. There's no additional movement point to cross bridges or pontoon bridges for LOC. A force beyond or cut off from the line of communication will not receive administrative points. We're going to swap batteries. A nice chance to light another pipe, well, fill another pipe, and check on my raid, which was doing terribly. Okay, admin points feature is money And tools and facilities, food was normally purchased from the local population, just a note. Admin points are mainly used for issuing orders, which you must exert for each force if you wanted to undertake any military operation. I actually think you just have to do it. You have to give like a stand order. APs can also be used for special tasks. In the optional rules and scenario, admin points are received by the Capitano Generale and must be used by him to issue orders. For each army is provided an AP marker on the admin points track. I got those over here. Stains on my table again. And they'll be tracked down here. Again, I wish that was on the map. I really do. And they're accumulated. New admin points are received on scheduled turns during the administrative segment of the player turn. I think that's the yellow turns, and you get a certain amount of points per scenario. So in this scenario, I think the Neapolitans get 4 for each segment. Well, a prospective 4. And the Turks maybe get a prospective 1, depending on the situation. We'll look at that when we start actually fiddling with the scenario. They're indicated in the scenario instructions in yellow on the turn record track. The nominal quantity of APs, nominal, they mean prospective, really, by each army is indicated in the scenario instructions. The player refers to the administrative points table. So many tables. Here we have it. And where are we? To determine the actual number of APs they get, you calculate the line of communication from the supply source to the Capitano General, counting regions crossed by the line of communications, not hexes. Everything is going to be in the same region. In this first scenario, it's limited to one region. Roll 2 dice and cross-reference the LOC distance with the die result. Some weather conditions will affect this. The number on the table will modify the number of APs that you receive. The final result, which may not be negative, it'll bottom out at 0, are added to the accumulated total. If you have multiple or no Capitani Generale, the owning player selects the one to trace the line of communication to. In the case where there's none, the Capitani may trace their command path to its active supply source. We'll see how that works. How to mark administrative points. Each army accumulates AP by means of its Capitano Generale. Use an admin point marker. When there's more than one Capitano Generale on the map, only one will get the APs. If the Capitano Generale changes, there will be no modification to the accumulated administrative points, unless he is hit in combat. Adjust the marker on the track to record the level as it ebbs and flows. Flip it to indicate more than 10 accumulated. You may not have more than 19. APs of one army may only be used by the Capitano Generale of that army and never by another army, even if belonging to the same coalition. Again, that'll be by scenario. Army organization, reorganizing armies, unit transfer. During the friendly organization segment, a unit may be transferred to the track of another Capitano who is currently in the same uncontested hex. This includes barons, which can be consolidated in a force. Subordinate Capitani, unemployed Capitani, and baron units may also be removed from the Capitano Generale's card and placed on the game map alone or as new forces. An order must be issued to any new force on the map at the end of the organization segment. I'm wondering, because my Italian doesn't exist, but I'm wondering if there's sort of something between, like the fact that this is not Capitani is disturbing to me. Subordinate Capitani, unemployed Capitani. I don't think so. I think that's just a typo. Okay. Strength transfer. SPs from one combat unit can be transferred to another combat unit in the same force or to another force in the same hex if the hex is uncontested. You may not increase the strength of a unit beyond its maximum. They have to both be the same nationality, type, quality, and reliability class. Any unit whose strength is reduced to 0 in this process is permanently removed from the game. A combat unit receiving demoralized SP becomes demoralized itself. A demoralized combat unit receiving undemoralized stays that way. Issuing and reissuing orders. Orders are used for a number of actions. Each turn, the Capitano Generale may distribute orders to himself and to other primi capitani. Like attorneys general, damn it. On the map. During turns when administrative points are received, orders must be removed and then reissued. To issue an order, a command path must be traced from the Capitano Generale to the receiving Capitano. A command path is a contiguous path of hexes of unlimited length, free of enemy forces, and traced only through passable hexes. A command path may be freely traced into and through a contested hex. When more than one Capitano Generale is present, the owning player freely selects the one from which to issue every order that turn. I don't like this because it feels like you can roll with one and issue with the other. I don't think you can issue with both, but each order issued has a cost depending on the type of force, minor or major. Now, let's reconsider what a major force is because I don't think I went over that. 5.1, minor, yeah, the Capitani Generale's force is the major force. That is the only forces that can be major. The orders table specifies the cost and allowable actions for each order. Pay the appropriate cost in APs from the administrative point and put an order mark on top. Retreat is placed near the Capitano on the map. And we'll talk about that later. But here's the orders table. And you'll see, like, garrison always costs 0. Stand costs 1 to begin with, but it doesn't cost I don't know what that means. Use new in turns where APs have been received. Use changed. Oh yeah, so if you were doing, so it's going to cost you 1 to stand on a yellow turn, but it costs 0 to change to a stand order, which is kind of interesting. Maneuver here. Use change to what? Subtract the cost of the current order. Yeah, so maneuver, depending on what you're doing, you're going to subtract the cost of whatever current order you do from the new column. So if you did a stand, if you were doing a stand and you go to maneuver, it only costs you 2, which is what it would cost to begin with. An attack, if you were in maneuver, it would only cost you 2 to switch to an attack. All very interesting. And retreat's kind of sometimes an involuntary order. You can issue it, but it's generally going to be involuntary. I mean, why would you do it? Well, because you don't want to stand and you don't want to pay AP. That's why. All right. Where are we here? Only a primo capitano or baron force can receive orders. Unemployed and subordinates may not receive orders. Yeah, they don't have any troops, so they don't need them. A force may never remain without an order. If an order must be issued to a force and the force does not have a valid command path, the force receives a forced order. We'll get to that in a moment. It doesn't look to me like, yeah, the command path is unlimited length. So although this is a little fucked up, in my opinion. The Zucker games had a system where, yes, your commanding general had to trace back to the original, to the supply origin. And that's generated how many action points he got. But he could only issue command points within a radius. And so if you sent, a subordinate force out, it would basically be on initiative. You don't have initiative in this game. You have the forced orders, and we'll talk about that. But you don't really have an initiative system in this game. So the mechanism is just different, but it's got some similarities. It's obviously derived and credited, to be fair. Okay. Orders have no effect on the ability of a force to conduct combat. A force in a contested hex with a stand order might attack. Siege combat, however, may not be declared without an attack order. Okay, here are the orders. Garrison. If you have garrison, you must be in an owned fortress. The force must remain in the hex inside or outside the fortress. The force can expend movement points to build earthworks, for example, but cannot exit the hex. The base initiative is temporarily reduced to 0. This order may be used to recover demoralized combat units. Stand. This is like a garrison, except you can do it in any hex. Not sure I see too much difference, but okay. Oh, no. Yeah, I think it reduces you to 0 as well. Maneuver. Forces using maneuver may conduct regular march and road march. Attack. Forces using attack can conduct regular march and march to battle. The attack order may not be selected by a force with half or more of its combat units demoralized. It is required for siege. Retreat. Forces using retreat may expend their movement allowance only to retreat. Use the rules and priorities governing retreat after combat. A force with a retreat order may end its retreat in an owned town or fortress hex and can stop moving. Once issued, this order is inherited by any force which splits from the original. The basic initiative rating is temporarily augmented by 1. But that's to get away from combat. Forcing orders. When an order is issued, if a player does not want to or cannot pay necessary APs, or if the receiving Capitano does not have a valid command path, the order is assigned anyway. This is termed a forced order. If there's a forced order, the force must do an immediate discipline check, modified by +1. And we'll get to discipline checks, but +1 is bad. Changing orders. An order may be changed during any command phase. To change the order, consult the orders table. Well, only in the white ones, because in the yellow ones you lose it. Consult the orders table, read the AP cost under change in the line corresponding. New forces orders. When a new force is created during the commander activation phase, an order must immediately be issued, paying the APs from the accumulated army, or forcing the order. Furthermore, during activation, the new force will inherit an activation marker of the same value as the parent force. Removing orders. During the administrative segment of turns when new points are received, the yellow turns, orders of all forces, including the Capitano Generale, must be removed. New orders will be issued in the next supply segment. So you're going to have a constant cost drain. To remove orders, first all previous attack orders are removed, markers are removed. Then all orders are removed except the attack order. This latter is turned face down to show previous attack marker. The previous attack marker remains on the Capitano's card until the next turn when APs are received and orders are removed. And it's going to prevent you from making attacks very often. If a previous attack marker is present on a Capitano's card and an attack order is received by that Capitano, the force must immediately make a discipline check. This discipline check is in addition to the one possibly required for a forced order to limit offensives. When a force enters a hex to join another force, the order of the highest ranked Capitano takes precedence. The other order is removed during the next consolidation segment. Activation. Forces must be activated to perform the various game actions. Orders will restrict what forces may do. The force could possibly suffer attrition during the activation. Reinforcements are Capitani and combat units which do not begin the game on the map. Yeah. This is in the scenario. They're usually given a free maneuver order unless they specify something else. No APs will be spent for this. They must comply with stacking rules and multi-force hexes. Scenario rules specify reinforcements that appear directly in another force. In order to receive them, the receiving force must trace a valid line of communication, otherwise the reinforcements are forfeited. If the hex is occupied by an enemy force, reinforcements cannot enter the map unless the scenario. The owning player may delay the reinforcements indefinitely whether or not the designated hex is free of enemy occupation or not. Okay, to the activation of Capitani. We've already kind of talked about this in the sequence of play, but it's cool. Activations of Capitani are carried out in activation phase of each game turn following this process. Both players indicate one Primo Capitani. Primo, not Capitani General, but the chief, the guy who commands the force is really what it comes down to. It could be the Capitano General. Each player calculates and applies modifiers to the initiative rating for the indicated Capitano, for order, for enemy forces in the same hex, or if it's a second activation. Then they roll a die and subtract the die roll result from the modified initiative of their own Capitano. This determines who activates and the modified movement allowance. Now, initiatives aren't very high, so Alfonso here has the highest one at 3, and I'm subtracting a die roll from that to get his movement allowance. A player may always decline. Okay, let's keep going. Wait, we missed something. Determine who activates. Okay, this result determines who activates and tells you the movement allowance. Then you do the movement, which we'll get to down here. Or activation. And then you check for attrition in case of a second activation. Okay. Indicating who to activate. Both players point to a Primo Capitano on the map, including reinforcements that they intend to activate. The first player indicates first in the first activation of each turn. During each turn, the player who activated the last one has to indicate first in the next activation. And he may not have chosen to activate. He may have been forced to. A player who may always decline to indicate a Capitano, but in doing so, he will not be able to activate any more for that game turn, and that's a pass. Unemployed Capitani may not be indicated. Up to 2 of them may be moved after the activation of a Primo Capitano. Determining the activating Capitano, each player rolls a die, and the result is subtracted from initiative of the indicated one. Modifiers to initiative are applied. The player obtaining the higher total result may decide which of the 2 Capitani activates. That is to say, the winning player may decide to go for himself or make the opposing Capitano go. If the 2 results are equal, the Capitano with the higher printed initiative decides. If they're still equal and one has a bonus star, the star gets to decide. If still undecided, re-roll on the same Capitani and repeat the process. So if you get a tie, a full-out tie, you may end up just completely re-rolling and getting totally different numbers. Non-activating Capitani are still eligible for activation later in the turn. Initiative is modified by the following. Orders. Orders can affect this, and that's in the order table. We were over there. We have initiative equals 0, initiative equals 0, initiative plus 1 for retreat. Those are the only ones. Okay. Enemy forces. If enemy forces are in the same hex, that may indicate it. So you look at the enemy Capitano's initiative, and that'll give you a penalty to your initiative, tying you down, making it less likely that you do anything. You can see it's going to be hard to move things. It's going to be kind of funny. Second activation, if you've already been activated before, you get a -1 to your initiative. The modified initiative can be less than 0, damn straight. An activated Capitano can do any action allowed by his current order. The die roll is subtracted from his modified initiative rating. If it's equal to 0, the force may move its full movement allowance. If the result is a negative number, that number is a penalty to the force's movement allowance. Okay, so it's not as bad as I thought it was. Yeah. Should be equal or greater than 0, right? No, if the result is greater than 0, 1 is added to the force's movement allowance. Okay. Didn't wish to read. Orders. A Capitano with a maneuver, attack, or retreat order may be activated 2 times in a single game turn. A Capitano with garrison or stand can only be activated once, and their initiative is 0. A Capitano with a retreat has initiative increased by 1, but looks like they can only activate once. No, twice. Okay, never mind. Again, reading comprehension. When you activate, you get a first activation marker. If it's your second activation, you get your second activation marker and you can't do any more. After you've completed your activation, you're finished. With a garrison or stand order, if you cannot move, but you use your activation to do other things, like recovering. Okay, when one player's Capitani are all finished, at most 2 activations for each, or after one player declines to point to an Capitani, the opposing player may make 1 activation with each of his remaining Capitani, which have not been activated in the current game turn. Now, no, we're not doing all this die roll shit and everything with the baronial forces. Actions. Okay. Orders allow specific game actions. Regular march allows a force to normally move along roads and other terrain, however, it cannot enter a hex with an enemy force. This is how you're normally moving, and it has no special marker. Road march. A road march doubles the force's movement allowance on roads, and it has a marker, and I believe if you're attacked while under road march, you're in trouble. March to battle. This allows a force to move normally. The force may enter any allowable hex, even into an enemy force. You don't need a specified marker because during your movement, you know, when you declare you're marching to battle, you do your movement. You just, you know, whatever. Okay. Recover. This action allows a force with a standard garrison order to recover from demoralization and may be declared by any eligible force as an additional option to any other actions performed with the same order. Movement. Force can move no further than its slowest unit, but you can drop off slower units. Not every force must move. Movement is optional and dependent on initiative. Unused movement points cannot be saved. Once you determine that a force may move, you must move it immediately. It can continue to move until any unit finishes its last movement point, but you can drop it off. A force may never enter a hex unless every combat unit in the force has movement points to move in. There's no 1 hex minimum move. Only a force with an attack order can enter a hex occupied by the enemy. All right, we'll work our way through these next few pages. Okay. El Gran Capitan was the first leader in the Italian wars who succeeded to make effective use of earthworks combined with firearms in battle. It gives some more historical notes there. Forces, but not baronial forces, with any order except retreat, with at least 2 infantry SP, may expend movement points to set up earthworks, fortifications, in any, even in a contested hex. A force with earthworks is not compelled to attack. Earthworks allow, normally you would be. Earthworks allow sieges, in that siege procedures may only be initiated if a force has an earthworks. A force may place an earthworks on itself at the cost of 1 movement point. After an activation, if there's no force in the hex capable of building earthworks, the earthworks is removed, i.e. the 2 SP. When friendly forces coexist in the same hex, one retains, or has not, its own earthworks marker. If any earthworks marker is present on any of these forces, if and when they will consolidate, the resulting force will have the marker. Forces only composed of cav and artillery may not build earthworks. Earthworks may be built in any kind of terrain hex, including a fortress. They have to be for siege. If a force under an earthworks marker is attacked, 2 more of the defender's SP are doubled when calculating odds on the assault table. Furthermore, the attack will be on the affecting line. If earthworks are set up in a fortress, this is in addition to the combat effects of the fortress. So you would be able to, like if you're defending a fortress, you can build earthworks out in front of it and give you additional defensive benefits. You get a defensive benefit from the fortress itself in the field battle, though. Cav charges artillery fire in certain unit types when an attack is resolved on the attack on the assault table suffer a penalty if the defender has an earthworks marker. An attacking force with an earthworks marker does not benefit from combat, and you can actually lose it by attacking under certain circumstances. Maybe only under the optional rules. There's two categories of terrain types. Those which apply to the area inside the hex and those which are the hex side. The base movement point cost for clear terrain is 1 movement point. Non-clear is going to be on the chart. Roads. Marching from one road to another allows you to pay the road cost. They do pass through fortified cities, but the hex cost of the fortress is paid rather than the cost of the road. No bypasses. Rivers. Crossing a river on a road. The cost to enter the hex on the other side of the river would be the same as for the road, plus the hex side cost for the bridge. A bridge is present on any kind of road that crosses a river. Rivers can be crossed far from road hexes, but a different terrain cost is paid. Pontoon bridges can be built across rivers. There's no additional effect to line of communication for crossing rivers. If a major force crossing a river by any means becomes disrupted after crossing the river, it expends 2 or more additional movement points to cross the river. No, I'm sorry. A major force crossing a river by any means becomes disrupted after crossing the river if it expends 2 or more movement points, additional movement points to cross the river. Which, here you can see a force crossing a river at a bridge during rain pays +2 movement points, so it becomes disrupted. A fortress is a hex with a fortified town or city. A limited number of strength points may receive the benefit of the fortress. A force may freely enter a fortress free of enemy forces. You cannot move off the map. A force entering an enemy-occupied hex must stop in the hex and cannot move further that activation. They may pass through friendly forces during movement or retreat without effect. An activated Capitano with a maneuver order can use the road march. This augments their movement allowance on roads, but leaves it more vulnerable. The force may declare a road march at any point, paying an additional movement point to begin the action, getting a road march marker. The force exerting road march doubles its remaining movement point allowance and may move only on roads. Such a force may not expend movement points other than to move along roads. If the force voluntarily leaves road march, the marker is removed and it forfeits all remaining movement points, i.e. you can't do something tricky to get doubled and then get rid of the road mark. There's no movement point cost to remove the marker. The force cannot enter a hex which is within 2 of an enemy force, regardless of impassable terrain, other units. A force in road march may never stack with another friendly force in road march. If a force is attacked while in road march, the quality of all of its combat units is reduced by 1, in addition to anything else. The attacked force automatically exits from road march mode. Any modification to the movement allowance of the force takes place before the doubling for road march, not after. Contested hexes. Forces on both sides in a single hex are contesting the hex, otherwise it's uncontested. Force can enter a hex with an enemy force under the following conditions. Half or more of the force's combat units are in good order, and it has an attack order, and it has enough movement points to enter the hex. It must stop when entering the hex with an enemy force and may move no further, although it can expend movement points to build earthworks. I don't know if there's anything else it can do. Half or more of the combat units have to be in good order. This is kind of weird because can it recover after it moves in? It can recover before it moves in, which would be wiser anyway. There's no extra cost to enter a hex with an enemy force. Artillery may not enter such a hex unless part of a mixed force with cav or infantry. Capitani are revealed when they enter a hex with an enemy force, but not the composition of their forces, which is revealed only during combat and attrition. Exiting a contested hex. A force can try and exit a contested hex. It costs 1 additional movement point to exit. The standard procedure for activation is followed, and the indicated Capitano's initiative will be modified by the initiative of the Primo Capitano for the activation purpose. This initiative modifier. If there are more enemy Capitani in the contested hex, the highest initiative rating is used to determine the modifier and subsequent pursuit effects. Consult the modifier table and apply the results. This will always modify the indicated Capitano's initiative. When a besieging force tries to exit from a besieged hex, consider also the enemy Capitani in the besieged fortress. Fortresses departing from a siege suffer pursuit normally by the besieged force. A besieged force may try to exit from a contested hex, but there's a penalty in the form of an initiative modifier. Over here. There's also one for multiple enemy forces in the same hex, which I haven't seen mentioned. A force must exit a contested hex at the first occasion if condition 1 of Rule 8.81 is not satisfied during a turn. Yes, if you're not in good order. Okay. If a force obtains enough movement points during an activation to exit a contested hex, this move causes an automatic pursuit by the enemy force in the contested hex. Never seen anything like this before that I recall. The moving force may use movement points to reduce the pursuit effects. If the force does not obtain enough movement points to move, it remains in the contested hex with no further effect. If the force obtains enough movement points to move, before it moves, the enemy force applies the pursuit procedure using the pursuit table. This is modified by -1 for each full movement point voluntarily expended by the moving force. This is a rear carding action. If any are available, in addition to those that enter the hex, the moving force may resume movement after the pursuit if it's possible to do so. Let's see if we can find the pursuit table. There it is. So it depends on the type of unit. Okay, interesting. When more than one enemy force is in the contested hex, each of them will roll on the pursuit table in the order chosen by the owning player using the same die roll cumulative modifier. So you really want to leave a rear guard. You don't just want to walk away. A force occupying a fort, this is an exception, a force occupying a fortress will not suffer this kind of pursuit if before leaving it's able to drop off a force in the contested hex holding the fortress, and it runs out the back door. A force retreating after combat is not subject to this rule. Whoop, you'd think there would be pursuit after combat. There is, it's different. A force composed of only demoralized combat units cannot pursue. An ambushing force can exit from a contested hex, but it cannot use movement points to modify the pursuit die roll. So you could get schwacked on your way to ambushing someone. Limitation in exiting from contested hexes. A force may never move directly from a contested hex to a hex with an enemy force. I don't know about this ambushing force then. Kind of want to look that up. Oh, we're in scenarios. That's what's wrong. 16.4. The captain has to have the ambush. No, a Spanish Capitano and any Baron forces with an attack order are ambush capable. It looks like you can go directly from one to another with an ambush, because otherwise there wouldn't be this pursuit exception here. So this looks like it's actually there's a conflict in the rules here. All right, I need to swap batteries a little bit more before I break. During activation, a force with an attack order may attempt to attack an enemy force on its path. This is an attack from march, and it's an exception to the standard rule that combat take place during combat and attrition. It's an overrun. An attack from march requires the expenditure of one movement point on part of the active force, in addition to the cost to enter the hex. You cannot attack from march if you don't have enough movement points. Yeah. The force enters the hex with the enemy's force to be attacked. Must comply with the normal 8.8.1 to enter the enemy occupied hex. The owning player declares attack from march, hidden Kapitani are revealed, and a skirmish is immediately applied, even if other battle procedures would exist. With the attacking force using the affecting role of the assault table, and the attacked forces might retreat before combat. Exception, forces composed solely of light cavalry combat units use the non-affecting row of the assault table. This is going to be hard to remember these kind of exceptions, but I don't know. I probably have to look it up, the whole thing up anyway. So, a force in a fortified city hex may not be attacked from march. An attack from march may be performed only if there is just one enemy force in the hex. The hex may also be already contested. Any friendly forces there don't take part in it and are ignored. The number of successful attacks from march a force may initiate is limited only by the number of movement points it has. It's not saying what happens if I fail. I get the feeling that I can't keep going, but it doesn't look specified there. All right, I'm going to break for a while now. Try to pay attention to my damn battery there. I think I'll swap it back into this to charge it. Right, let's keep pushing through. Attrition. Force checks for attrition when it makes a second activation at the end of that, even if it didn't spend movement points or didn't get any. During attrition segment of combat and attrition phase, if any of the conditions apply, if it's in a hostile region, if it's in a barren land, if it's in a contested hex, or is currently under siege. In the first case, after a force conducts its move, does its attrition, consult the attrition table. And bonus star gets a bonus, weather is a penalty, second activation, each movement point expended costs you a penalty to a maximum of 4. Although road march is less painful. And that's going to give you an indication of what? Number of SPs that you lose. And you compare the size of the force to the die roll. So again, much like in the Zucker games, big force, well, in anything reasonable, big forces suffer worse attrition. In the other case, it doesn't depend on movement points expended. In any case, if a force gets a modified roll of 9 or more, they get a plague marker in that hex. If the hex is a town or city, the marker will stay till the end of the scenario. Otherwise, it's removed at the end of the current game turn. Any force in a hex with a plague marker rolling for attrition in the combat and attrition phase gets a +4 modifier to their die roll. Okay, and being besieged with no line of communication is a penalty as well. Discipline. During command or combat and attrition phases, forces currently in play may be subject to discipline checks to verify they're able to sustain command or combat fatigue. Every unit has a troop quality. That's the number in the shield up at the top. That ranges from 1 to 3. They also have a reliability class, which is the letter down here in the lower left. During command phase, this is required when a unit is given a forced order or a continuous attack. During combat and attrition phase, it may be required as a result of combat by the assault or other combat tables. A discipline check is always made once for all units in a force. A single die is rolled, taking into account any modifiers. The result is cross-referenced with the troop qualities during combat or reliability during command or activation of any combat unit in the force. The results are explained below in the discipline table. If a combat unit becomes demoralized, flip it to the reverse side to indicate the fact. I like this. I like the fact that they're distinguishing between reliability and quality. I've always... So, looking at like medieval forces and whatnot, and these aren't that far from it, you have the concept of like, you know, the knighthood that have a high quality and probably wouldn't break under combat conditions particularly, but they also might refuse orders or cause other problems. So I like that distinguishment. I'm not sure I like that the effect are going to be the same off the table. If the Primo Capitano has a bonus star, you get a bonus. Forced orders give you a penalty. Demoralize, we can take a look at the table, discipline table. It's either a pass, a fail, where it loses SP, FF is a bigger loss, otherwise treated as a D. It's a weird one. It's like if it's a bigger FF is if it's a bigger force, it loses 2 SPs. Here, if it's like it could lose half its strength points, but it wouldn't lose any there. That seems a little odd. I'm not sure I really like how the table is designed. A D is demoralized. The unit is demoralized. If already demoralized, it's eliminated. This is also strange because it looks like it doesn't take a D off of failure. Although if it's a small force, it's D'd. And the D star, I'll send it to pillage a space, and we'll get to that in a moment. A single die is rolled for the entire force. Yeah, we did that. Okay. A demoralized unit has its movement allowance reduced by 1. That'll be on the counter. They can be rallied through recovery. Demoralized combat units cannot be used in combat. If they're demoralized during a major battle or siege, they may not be used further in the current combat, nor may they be selected to absorb losses or any other result. After the major battle, they will absorb pursuit losses. A force composed of half or more... Oh, that's the upper one. Demoralized combat units cannot select an attack order, and it must change it if it has one. It cannot contest a hex because of that. In addition, when all combat units in a force become demoralized, the force gets a retreat order regardless of the game situation. I guess they get it for free. After its initial retreat order, it may only select retreat, stand, or garrison. If attacked, it must retreat before combat after step 2 of the combat sequence, and it may not initiate any form of combat. Recovery check. Combat units may recover from demoralization during activation. When a unit recovers, flip it to the front side. To recover, it must be in garrison or stand order and cannot be in a contested hex. When the force activates, it can make a recovery check after and in addition to any other actions performed by the force, i.e. build earthworks. Roll a die on the discipline table for the entire force, cross-reference with reliability, and determine the effects on each demoralized unit of the force as per its reliability. Yeah, so you're either going to use troop quality or reliability depending on the situation. -1 for Primo Capitano with bonus. That's just the commander of the force. Extra wages, you can spend 2 AP and no more to get another -1, but a +1 if you expended any movement points during your activation when you're trying to recover, like building earthworks. Disruption, a major force may become disrupted when crossing a river, and it gets this counter. Any force becomes disrupted when storming a fortress or from pillaging. During the game, when a force becomes disrupted, it puts a disrupted marker. When a force is disrupted, the quality of all of its units is reduced by 1 in addition to any other possible reduction. Disruption are removed from the combat units in segment D4 of the sequence of play. I don't know where that is, probably at the end of the turn. one would guess. At the end of combat, before attrition. Okay. That's big that it's before attrition because, one, you get it during attrition, but also the quality does not matter in the attrition phase. So, yeah, that won't affect anything. No additional effect if a disrupted force is disrupted again. Stacking and consolidation. No limit to the number of strength points that can be in a hex, and the number of friendly forces that pass through a hex, excepting road marches. Though no more than 3 forces of any kind per side may ever occupy the same hex. Well, that kind of sounds like... Oh, pass through. Okay, sure. Capitani in the same uncontested hex must be moved onto the subordinate or unemployed Capitani box of the Capitano General's card during the consolidation segment of either the activation phase or the combat and attrition phase. Baron forces may be consolidated as combat units. Consolidation is normally not allowed in contested hexes. During a consolidation, so that sounds like if you're attacking someone with 2 forces, you can't bring a third one in or whatever, and actually only it just becomes too crowded, basically, too confused. During consolidation, 2 or more friendly minor forces, including Baron forces, coexisting in the same uncontested hex, because they did not manage to exit, must consolidate as well. The highest rank Capitano becomes Primo Capitano, but not Capitano General. All other Capitani become unemployed. All combat units in the hex are transferred to the Primo up to his rank. Any that are in excess are removed. You are not allowed to voluntarily stack baronial forces alone. Okay, combat. This is going to be big. We may stop at major battle here. Okay, each force in a contested hex at the beginning of a combat and attrition phase may take part in a battle in that hex. A battle is 1 or 2 combats in a contested hex, each combat being one of 4 types: major battle, skirmish, siege, and sortie, conducted only by the forces in the battle hex. The battle segment, resolution segment is resolved as follows. First, and some of this is going to change for major battles with the option. The scenario's first player decides the order in which all contested hexes are considered to resolve combats. Mark the contested hex with battle marker and transfer all involved Capitani in a big hex of the battle roster. All right, let's get this thing here. There's big hexes. Not that. Okay. Sort all Capitani according to their initiative. Okay. Yeah, so I think each battles are they're battle markers that are marked A through D. So I think they reflect these. So you move all of them in. Okay. If a battle hex contains a fortress, the owning player can have any one of his forces in the battle hex inside the fortress, defending inside of it. This force can be attacked and can do a sortie. Otherwise, all of his forces will fight outside of it. The HIF, highest initiative force, must decide to attack or be attacked by any one enemy force. If the owning player decides to be attacked, he must select any one eligible enemy force in the battle, and that enemy force is compelled to attack. There are some exceptions to forcing something to attack. Determine the type of combat and resolve the combat. If the battle hex is still contested, the Primo Capitano with the highest initiative of the side opposing to the HIF, when undecided, select one in, as in 12.1. Oh, highest initiative. Here we go. The highest initiative force has the highest printed initiative among all other Capitani. If more than one Capitano has the same, bonus star gives you highest. If still undecided, roll a die. Where are we? Now performs the step exactly as in D above, which is deciding to attack or be attacked. And then another combat step, E, is resolved. And you keep doing that. No, you move to another contested hex and repeat the whole process from step A above until all battle situations are resolved. Now, the fact that you jump back to E means you're going to hit counterattacks again. So attacks will keep happening until the hex is no longer contested, I guess. Types of combat. Major battle. In a battle in which Primo Capitani is the Capitano General for both the attacker and defender. All attacking units of both... There seems to be a quantity mismatch. All combat units of both forces will be involved in the combat. I think that's all, of the two forces, because there might be another force in there. Skirmish, a combat in which only one force or neither force has a Capitano General involved. A skirmish is limited to one Capitano from each side. Now, somewhere I think there was minor battle. It's skirmish, if they said that. There's no differentiation. Siege, a combat in which the defender is inside a fortress. The attacking force must be in earthworks with an attack order in the moment of declaration of the combat. Artillery will be included in the battle. Artillery is not included in a skirmish. Sortie, a combat in which the attacker is attacking out of the fortress. Artillery is not included. Generally, a force must attack or compel an enemy, the attack of an enemy force, but there are some exceptions, which we get to. These do not have to attack, nor can be compelled to attack. A force is not required to attack, nor may be compelled to attack an enemy force defending inside a fortress. A force inside a fortress or protected behind earthworks cannot be compelled to attack. A force composed of half or more demoralized units may not attack. A force cannot compel to attack an enemy force whose Primo Capitano has an equal or higher initiative rating. What does all that mean? Well, you might be required to attack somebody behind an earthworks if you're there, because you can't compel it to attack you. You might be compelled to attack a Primo Capitano who has a higher initiative rating or an equal initiative rating because you don't have higher. So winning that die roll is not necessarily good. We have to swap batteries here. I don't know what's going on, but I feel, I keep coming back up and reading the rules and whatnot. Much more engaged in reading the rules, something that I don't generally like to do anyway, than playing Tanto Monta. Just in terms of like wanting to take breaks and everything, I just don't need them right now. I don't know why, but there you have it. I don't know if it'll hold over to the actual play of the game. All right. All types of combat share the same, but I'll say this much. These rules are kind of a joy to read after, like, I don't know what I dealt with before Tanto Monta, but its rules were just painful to me. I did Clash of Monarchs not long ago. Yeah, not sure. Not sure what I just did before that. Oh, I know I did Wellington's Victory, and I had to go away a lot during that at some point. Okay. All types of combat share the first two steps. Each further step depends on the type of combat. All right, designate the attacking force. The force deciding to attack or which has been compelled to attack is the attacking force. If there's more than one enemy in the battle force in the battle hex, which can be compelled to attack, the friendly force may choose which one is the attacking force. A force may be compelled to attack and then counterattack in the same battle. Again, it seems to me that counterattack here exactly as in D above, then another combat step is performed. Maybe there's just an attack and a counterattack. Yeah. It's a little unclear how it's written. My assumption was you would continue fighting rounds, but I think you only fight one round. But anyway, let's keep going. We'll see if there's more indications. Because it says a force may be compelled to attack and then counterattack. It doesn't say anything about continuation going on in there. So I think that I made an incorrect assumption about, just keep fighting. Like that this is kind of like a loop here. Anyway, it is not clearly stated though. Designate the defending force. If a force decides to attack and there's more than one enemy force in the battle hex, the attacking player can choose which one enemy force is the defending force. If a friendly force compels an enemy force to attack, the friendly force is the defending force. If the defending force is outside the fortress, the combat procedure continues with a major battle, skirmish, or sortie, considering the effects of the other terrain of the hex. If the defending force is inside the fortress, the attacking player may begin a siege, if he's in a position to do so, or storm the fortress using a skirmish procedure. The defending force will benefit from the fortress effects only if it defends inside the fortress. To be inside or outside a fortress is relevant only during combat from step 2 of the combat resolution. At all other times, it's just in the hex. Now, this is interesting because you can't be forced to siege or storm, okay? All right, declaring a siege. A force intending to begin a siege must be in an earthworks at the moment of the declaration with an attack order. If a siege status level marker is not already present, a level 0 marker is put on the defending force and a siege marker on or beside the declaring force during step 2 of the combat resolution. Okay, let me show you these markers. This is the siege marker, and then the siege status marker, it's not there, is over here. These with numbers. Okay. Okay. From this moment on, the defending force will continue to occupy the fortress and is besieged. The siege status level marker will reflect the level of the siege status and will be removed if the besieging force leaves the contested hex or if the fortress is conquered. The marker is not removed even if the besieging force attacks out of the fortress or leaves the hex. You're still sieging the fortress, I guess. An attack order is necessary to initiate a siege combat procedure. If the besieging force changes its order from attack to another order, it may not conduct siege combat. And remember, you can't be forced into this. However, the besieging force retains its siege marker, and the enemy force remains besieged, and its status level marker is not changed. It just isn't allowed to do the combat. Okay. Retreat before combat. A force composed solely of demoralized combat units, if attacked, must retreat before combat after step 2 of the combat sequence, using its full movement allowance unless it defends inside the fortress. This retreat follows the rules and priorities of retreat after combat, except that the retreating force will be pursued by the attacking force just as if it had exited from a contested hex. Combat is over and the winner remains in the hex. For all types of combat, the terrain of the battle hex is taken into account when resolving an attack on the assault table, as indicated on the terrain effects chart. And I think these are affecting and non-affecting, and that's it. Yeah. Like I said, too many damn... Here we go. Affecting... But we also have things like attacking or defending heavy cavalry times 0.5. So I think there are multiple. There are actually other effects for the combat than just affecting. I was not aware of that. Just read the rules, didn't look at the charts while I was reading. Okay. Siege exception. During siege combat, artillery fire from the besieged force only is affected by the battle hex terrain. Right, because the other guy is shooting at the walls. Earthworks. An attacking force, see designate the attacking force, loses the advantage of being in an earthworks for all duration of the battle. This force may be compelled to attack during a counterattack because they're no longer in their earthworks temporarily during the battle. Opposing river crossing. If a force enters an enemy-occupied hex by crossing a directly adjacent river hex side, the force receives an opposing river crossing marker and will be subject to the effects indicated on the various game tables. The marker is removed at the end of the combat phase. Now, when using major battle optional rules, the river chit is received by the defending force, and it actually isn't his entire force that's present behind it. I want it to break here. So I think I'm going to be using the optional major battle rules, which are similar to the first volume of the series. I am going to go over these in part because I think they somewhat impact it. I'm not positive. All right, let's look at this. Reorganization. So, both players may reorganize their forces as in an organization segment. This is step 3. Where do we have our steps? Step 3A. Step 2 is designate the defending force. What was step 1? Designate the attacking force. Yeah. Okay. So, have we handled skirmishes yet? No, skirmishes and sieges happen afterwards. Anyway, you reorganize your forces as if it's an organization segment. Each force is reorganized into a number of corps, which is a Capitano with his direct subordinate combat units. A corps is entirely resident on one Capitano card. All unemployed Capitani are placed with the Capitano General. Remember, there has to be one on each side for a major battle to happen. Corps will act independently during the battle. No Capitano commanding a corps can remain subordinate to the Capitano Generale, and the Capitano Generale may not remain unemployed. He has to have his own combat units as well, his own corps, if you will. Both players arrange their Capitano cards in order that only the cards of the Capitani commanding corps are visible to one's opponent. Normally, these are not visible, so each player deploys his Capitani involved on one of the 2 sections of the major battle. These are the 2 sections. I'm not sure what's up with that. Like the reserve is one of them, but okay. Each player, beginning with the attacker, may designate one or more corps as reserve, deploying them to their own section of the battle roster. Designated reserves are not involved in the battle and are ignored in the following steps, up to and including step 8A, which is the resolution of the engagement. All right. Not all corps can be placed in reserve. You have to have at least one in the fight. Yeah. Haha, we're all safe. Artillery fire. Each player selects one corps with artillery units, totals the number of undemoralized artillery strength points available, and resolves artillery fire using the artillery fire table. We'll get to that later. Artillery fire is going to be 2 rounds of fire. The firing player decides which one enemy corps is the target of the artillery fire. After the first round of fire is mutually executed and results are applied, both players proceed with the second round of fire with on the same target corps. I think what this is saying is that we each select a single corps to do artillery fire. We pick a target and fire at it. Mutually executed, I'm assuming they mean simultaneously. So both people fire once, and then both people fire twice the second time. Cav charge. Each player, beginning with the attacker, selects one corps with undemoralized cav units, decides which cav units he wants to commit to a charge, which one enemy corps, and which specific undemoralized enemy combat unit, i.e. one of these little things on the card, is the target of his cav charge, sums up the attacking strength points, and resolves the cav charge using the cav charge table. If both players decide to charge, charges are executed simultaneously and one against each other. I think the other, but whatever. Mark charging units with a charge marker. Why? We don't know yet. To execute a charge, count all undemoralized SPs of the charging cav and consult the cav charge table, taking into account the SPs, the cav quality, the heavy cav charge, terrain, and any other indicated die roll modifiers. The player rolls one die, the result is implemented in this order. SPs are first lost, then demoralizations, then discipline checks, and then Capitani elimination check. Apply the results of the charge immediately. Again, these are simultaneous, but if you're both doing it, I think it's a countercharge situation. Again, this is all going to change with the optional rules. It's already complex, but it gets much, much more so. And I may decide I don't like that and would rather go to this more abstracted version. Main body engagement. Beginning with the Capitani with the highest initiative in his force, the owning player decides ties, and descending, the attacking player declares an engagement against one or more enemy Capitani. In turn, each attacking Capitano must engage an enemy corps, or more than one, and each enemy Capitano must be engaged by some attacking Capitano. You're going to have potential many-to-one or one-to-many situations, and that's represented here. Corps with half or more demoralized combat units cannot engage enemy corps, but they can be engaged by the enemy side. Probably not great ideas to put in your front line, but whatever. You might have to. Once two opposing corps become involved in an engagement, they are stuck with their opponent unless the latter is eliminated, in which case the now free corps may join another already existing engagement, which feels a little weird if it's just one round of combat, okay? As a general rule, every engagement is always composed of one corps engaging one or more, or many corps engaging a single corps. If a situation arises where many friendly corps are engaged to many enemy corps, it must be divided out so that the rules expressed are adhered to. In order to fulfill the general rule above, an engagement must be broken down into smaller engagements. If there are multiple attacking corps against multiple defending, the corps which joined the engagement and created the abnormal situation selects an enemy corps and forms a separate engagement. Very important there that it's a single. But I'm really not sure why you'd be repositioning these. That's what's weird. And again, I don't have a great picture of this. I had one before, and then I got to the optional rules and kind of forgot about this. When all engagements are defined, resolve each individual engagement as an assault on the assault table, following the prescriptions below. No assault can be omitted after it's declared back in 7A. Total the attacking force strength, possibly composed of more than one corps, by summing up infantry and cav strength points only. Now, this is affected by the terrain effects chart. Cav strength points which took part to a cav charge in the same round of combat are included in the sum, but they're counted half, rounded up. Okay. Total the defending force strength the same way. The result in reverse on the assault table. I don't know what this means. So I need to see the assault table. The result in reverse on the assault table indicates which side loses. Result in reverse is brown. Okay. I guess they mean white text on dark side. And that's going to be, in general, the damage. But there's places like here where, you know, they're the same value. So, yeah. Okay, so that's what they mean. Results from the assault table are applied in the following order to the affected force. SP, combat units demoralized. These two results may not be applied to the same combat unit. Then the loser takes a discipline check, 1 die roll applied to all corps. Artillery SPs are not included in the odds determination unless they're defending alone. Or they have the capability. Mark defeated corps with a defeated marker. If one player has lost all engagements at the end of this step, the combat may end. Okay, this is beginning to sound like it goes multiple rounds, which then makes this make sense. Which is what I thought originally, but something else led me to believe you do 1 round of combat. You know what it is? What led me to believe that is the attack counterattack thing. I think you might have 2 main body engagements, an attack and then a counterattack, both containing multiple rounds of actual combat. Okay. Now, after the engagement is resolved, and the attacker got to pick which corps attack which corps, which seems like a big advantage. Beginning with the attacker, each player may commit any of his corps from reserve into the battle. The commitment of corps will fight enemy corps during the next round of battle. So there are multiple rounds. After both players have had an opportunity to commit reserve corps, if one player has in the battle only corps which were defeated in the engagement resolution step, the combat is over and he is the loser. Go to pursuit and recovery. Otherwise, the major battle proceeds in the next round, going back to step 7A, and the attacker again gets to pick which units are launching attacks against which enemy units. Seems to me like there's an advantage to the attacker, but there's terrain advantages to the defender. So I don't know. Sort of like initiative and control of the field versus defensive capability. If one side has more corps in the battle than the opponent's, then it becomes the new attacker, while the enemy side becomes the new defender. Okay, that's a big deal. So the battle can swing in direction. Now, you might have had a smaller force as the attacker to begin with. But anyway. Pursuit and recovery. The side which had all the corps defeated in an engagement resolution is the loser, and all of his combat units, including reserves, are subject to pursuit. The winning side rolls a die and consults the pursuit table to determine the casualties that are created. Now here we have like C number due to pursuing cavalry and I number due to... is that a percentage? Yes. Pursuit losses, percent of the pursuing undemoralized cavalry strength points. That's a really interesting thing because we're not using percents in the base casualty table. So the fight is not necessarily going to be, like, it's based on a differential up here on a corps by corps basis. So the actual corps aren't going to be doing percentage losses, but the pursuit is. Compare this to, say, Empires in Arms, where casualties are always generated on a percentage. It's a little different, right? It's an interesting combination. By breaking it into 2, we get to limit the actual engagement on the field of the main battle, but then the pursuit ends up being the big damage, potentially. Interesting. I like this thought. but we'll see what else happens here. Okay. Then again, I've always liked the percentage table games too, but those handle more abstract combat within a large area, you know, sometimes the size of a country. Okay, what do we got here? The winning side rolls a die, consults the pursuit table. Then half of the accumulated admin points of the pursued Capitano's army are lost. Then half of that amount, again rounded up, are transferred to the pursuing Capitano's army. Select the combat units to absorb losses due to pursuit in the following order: artillery before anything else, infantry, and finally cavalry are the last ones in each of the above categories. Demoralized units are selected first. Normally you wouldn't be able to hit them in combat because they took a demoralize and they fall back. I believe the SPs are lost first before the demoralize anyway. But you wouldn't be able to demoralize the units that took losses normally. Okay. Where do we have the ordering there? SP losses, combat units demoralized. These two results may not be applied to the same combat unit. Interesting, because what that seems to imply is that yeah, I think I have to try to take the demoralization, so I got to leave room to demoralize forces. I can't like take a hit on each unit and say, I'm immune to demoralization. I think I have to allow as many demoralizations without taking casualties. And remember, demoralization makes me lose the battle. Losing the battle puts me on the pursuit table, which gives me nasty, nasty losses compared to what I think the core combat's going to do. Okay, going back here. What did we have here? Pursuit table gives pursuit law. Yeah. Right. In each demoralized units are selected first. The pursuit table gives the losses and pursuit losses. Demoralized SPs count as 1 pursuit loss. Undemoralized SPs count as 2. So actually, these numbers aren't as nasty as they look. They're like half that against undemoralized units. But you have to take the losses on the demoralized first, so you're going to lose a lot of troops still. Yeah, okay, because your army's probably demoralized if you break. Modifiers to pursuit die roll. Pursuing Capitano has a bonus star, and the pursuing force has undemoralized Stratiots light cavalry. I do not know what those are. They sound very Greek, but whatever. I got to swap batteries. We'll be back. Noise is bugging the living shit out of me. It's like I felt a hair in it, and I don't know if it was a nose hair, and I tried to pull that out. Or a beard hair, that like a mustache hair that got up in there, but then it just started itching, and it's being weird. It was sniffly before. I don't know what the hell. Redeploy both forces on the map. So this is the retreat step. Redeploy both forces on the map and put a no move marker on the winning force to remind players that this force can't move during the next player turn, but it can spend movement points. During the next turn command phase, the no move marker is removed and replaced with either a stand or a garrison marker. Now again, there are capabilities the leaders have that get around this, the strategic or whatever. The losing force gets a retreat order and must retreat its full movement allowance. Execute the retreat. I kind of like that I have all the units way over there, so I can have everything all over the map that I want, according to the rules governing paths and priority of retreat. Okay, that's a major battle. Does that make sense? I don't know. Because it looks to me like one side is going to start out as the attacker, forced to make an attack, and it's going to process this and go to completion with one side or the other breaking, essentially. There doesn't seem to be anything that stops the major combat other than a retreat and a pursuit. And thereby leaving no room for the counterattack segment here. But the counterattack may be baked into the main body. Let's see, we'll be seeing very shortly how other battles work. starting with the skirmish. All right. Only the fighting force will take part in the skirmish combat. Two different situations can arise depending on the ability of the attacker to locate the defender. This is some complex shit going on here. Okay. This procedure is followed under two cases. Case A, the attacking player has not exited from its starting hex during the activation phase or to resolve an in-breach attack. So they started in a contest. The attacker is in a hex. Well, is in the hex. He started the entire activation phase. That seems weird. Let's just see. Yeah, an activation phase is quite a large thing, indeed. Okay. The in-breach attack is part of siege, okay? So he hasn't exited from his starting hex, or he is resolving an in-breach attack. Both of these cases are cases where you know where the enemy is. In these cases, both players select one Capitano, not unemployed, whose combat units are not all demoralized or all artillery. Now again, this is weird. Let's go back to this weird situation here. Combat procedure, right? The HIF must decide to attack or be attacked by any one enemy force. I don't feel like both players are making the selection here. Remember, in a skirmish, you have basically one of these cards on each side, okay? Because you don't have well, not necessarily. You might have a Capitano Generale in one side. So that's important. One Capitano with his forces is going to fight, even if it's the Capitano General there with a large force. He may only be able to send one of his little subordinates in. Gotcha. The other player doesn't get to select, though, I think. Okay, let's look here. Exception: the defending player may select a Capitano with only artillery combat units if this is the only eligible Capitano. A Capitano General may be selected too if he has direct subordinate combat units. The selected Capitano and all his undemoralized combat units will make up the fighting force, but not his underlings, I think. Okay, that's case A. That's, you know where the enemy is. Case B, if a skirmish is declared against a force in a fortress hex and the defending player declares his intention to defend inside, so benefiting from the fortress defensive advantages, the fortress is being stormed. Case B is the same, except the whole defending force is always the fighting force. Also, all combat units of the fighting force become disrupted when declaring the attempt to storm the fortress, but before resolving the attack. A defending force is automatically eliminated if it is composed of solely demoralized combat units. So this is not an in-breach attack. This is, you're attacking a located force, again, inside the fortress, but you didn't just get a breach. All right. Another option is it's an encounter attack. And this is not modified by the optional rules, none of this part. Follow this procedure when the conditions for attacking a located force do not apply. Players take their Capitani, not the unemployed ones, and randomly select one of them to be the fighting Capitano. Subordinates and the Capitano both subordinates and the Capitano General may be selected if these have subordinate combat units. Neither player may select as a fighting Capitano a Capitano whose subordinate combat units are all demoralized. Don't put these Capitani among those to be selected. The defending player must also include Capitani with only artillery from among those Capitani to be selected, while the attacking player must exclude them. Because it's going to be a random selection. Yeah, okay. You don't know which forces are meeting each other. And remember, Only one maximum of one Capitano general is here. So one of his corps runs into an independent force of the other player in that kind of case. Whereas in the other situation, the players get to select who they're putting forward for the skirmish. Which is similar to the Vanguard rules, sort of. Okay, we'll get to those later. In both the above situations, attacking a located force or an counterattack, a force composed only of demoralized or artillery combat units cannot attack using a skirmish battle. I think they can't defend either, but undemoralized combat units of the fighting force of each side, as determined in step 3B above. Determine the fighting force, okay. May now fight. Execute an attack using the assault table. Execute an attack on the AST, which is coming forward in the rules. Roll the die. The result in reverse indicates which side loses. Results from the assault table are applied in the following order. SP losses, combat unit demoralization. These two cannot be applied to the same unit. Then the loser takes a discipline check on the whole force, not only the fighting force. Wow. Okay, again, that's important if you have the Capitano General. All his units have to make a demoralization check, even though they're not actually fighting. Artillery SPs are not included in the odds determination unless they're defending alone. Skirmish combat, retreat. The force, the whole original force, not just the fighting force, whose combat units at the start of the combat total the most unmodified SPs, good order and demoralized, artillery included, terrain effects not considered, is the larger force. The other is the smaller force. In case of a tie, the attacking force will be considered the larger force. If the losing side was the smaller force, this force must retreat out of the battle hex using its complete movement allowance. Again, doesn't sound like there's room for a counterattack. I don't know where this counterattack comes from. Let's keep going. Maybe there's like a tie or something like that, but no. Wait. If the losing side was the smaller force, this force must retreat. If the losing side was the larger force, this force must retreat at least one hex from the battle hex and up to its maximum movement allowance. Afterwards, the smaller force may also retreat up to its full movement allowance. All combat units belonging to the attacking or defending force will follow the path of the fighting forces, advancing or retreating, even if they were not part of the fighting forces and so didn't take part in the fight. If a force was attacked inside a fortress and lost the battle, it cannot retreat. Instead, if all combat units are demoralized, the force surrenders. Yeah. Execute the retreats according to the rules governing passive priority retreat. I'm really disturbed because it really feels to me like the situation over here under combat procedure with counterattacks okay, there's allowed to be 3 forces in the hex, no more than that. I attack your force, I win, driving you out. And then whoever is in this position may be able to bring a secondary force into play. So all 3 forces would come into battle if needed. Just pulsed. I think that's the only way you can justify how it's worded. What I thought happened was that there was an attack, a counter, the guy who just got hit got to counterattack. It's not. If you look at how it's worded, the HIF decides who to attack or be attacked. Forces that battle based on the type of combat. But then, if there was another unit on the losing side, it would have to make an attack too. Of course, remember, the smaller force is allowed to retreat out of the hex even if it wins in the skirmish. Okay. I guess. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm trying to figure out how this all can actually work. Okay. I knew it, you know, I don't think I resolved this when I read through it before. What are we here? We did that. We did this. All combat units belonging to the attacking or defending force will follow the path of the fighting forces, advancing or retreating, even if wait, where was advance? All combat units belonging to the attacking or defending force will follow the path of the fighting forces, advancing or retreating, even if they were not part of the fighting forces and so didn't take part in the fight. Where was advance? I don't know. Yeah, I'm really not sure. I don't recall there being any advance here. And if there's an advance, that thing I just discussed couldn't work. So I'm beginning to feel like the rules don't really hold up in this area. Don't know what I'm going to do about it. All right, in the case of a siege, not storming the fortress, which is probably a really stupid idea unless you really overwhelm it. Okay, artillery fire, step 3C, which is after determining the fighting force, I guess. Both players resolve their artillery fire. Artillery fire is directed at the opposing force as a whole. Artillery units sum up their undemoralized SPs and use them to fire just one time on the artillery fire table. After both players have fired their artillery, the attacking player may want to break off the siege, in which case the siege is over and the procedure is interrupted and there's no loser. If a breach is obtained as a result of the artillery fire, the siege status level is increased by 1. Put an appropriate marker there on the besieged force to indicate the current level. The siege status cannot go over 3. The attacking player shifts a number of columns to the right for each siege status level on the artillery fire table. Whew, boy. We're looking. It was the back of the third thing I looked for. So, yeah, you'd get a number of strength points and then you'd get to shift it. Okay. And what are you looking to get here? Well, DC is a discipline check. B parenthesized B is treated as a B. B is a breach. If the besieging force has siege artillery or the besieged force is without artillery SP, then treat this as a B, otherwise no effect, which is the breach that you want to get. Number is going to be loss of SPs. What's an asterisk? Firing, yes. Artillery units lose 1. Okay. Whoever shot takes losses. Okay, great. All right, but both people get to fire at each other. You want to get a B result, which will get you a siege status level. And it also opens up an in-breach attack. You had to get the B on that artillery fire table. Non-artillery, undemoralized, besieging combat units can launch an attack. Conduct the attack as in skirmish combat when attacking a located force. Case A, breach result last for the duration of the battle. Case A, breach B. Okay, this is an in-breach assault. Okay, but there's like a duration of the battle, which sounds to me like you get to fight multiple rounds again. Execute an attack using the assault table. Roll the die and always resolve like skirmish combat, even if both forces contain a Capitano General. Well, the duration of a skirmish attack is 1 round, which then has this retreat rule, which wouldn't apply here. If a force was attacked inside lost, it cannot retreat. Instead, all combat units are demoralized. The force if all are demoralized, the force surrenders. I don't know if you do more rounds. Kind of sounds like you should. All right, siege aftermath. Maybe this will help. If the loser of an in-breach attack was the besieging force, both forces remain in place. The siege procedure is over and the winning force may not pursue. Sounds reasonable. They were repulsed. If the loser of the in-breach was the besieged force, all combat units have been eliminated, or demoralized by artillery fire, then the defending force is eliminated. Doesn't look like you get multiple rounds then. The attacker may now conquer and optionally pillage the fortress. A fortress benefits may be used by the new occupying force in any subsequent combat. The fortress may not be destroyed. All right, finally there's sortie. A force occupying a fortress may declare an attack out of the fortress, regardless of its current order or being in earthworks, against one enemy force, even not besieging, in the same hex. The player who makes the sortie chooses the fighting Capitano, while the other player randomly selects his fighting Capitano, which is, for him, kind of like an encounter attack, but for the other guy, not. Roll the die and always resolve like skirmish combat. Step 4B, which is the actual casualty situation, the die rolls and whatnot. Even if both forces contain a Capitano General, a major battle is never applicable to a sortie. At the end of the combat, both sides' forces remain in place, no retreat. Kind of no matter what. In effect, the only results which a sortie can cause is attrition or demoralization of the enemy forces. Note, however, that a demoralized besieger will likely abort combat. Yeah, because they can't recover while they're in the same hex. That makes sense. All right. Let's keep going, I guess. Execute an attack on the assault table. This procedure is used in major battle, skirmish, siege breach, and sortie attacks, and it'll also be used in the optional combat. Demoralized combat units are never considered for neither the attacker nor the defender to resolve an attack on the assault table. Like I said, sometimes the grammar is kind of weird. Okay. Quality. Determine the quality of the attacking and defending force. The force must be logically divided in quality groups. Okay, the way this works is you first look at the highest quality units. And if you have 50% or more of your units in that highest quality group, that's the quality you are. But you go down one level. So let's say I have, 4 quality 3 units and 2 quality 2 units, right? And then 5 quality 1 units. Okay. You don't take the straight plurality or whatever. You take where the majority or where the median or whatever lands, so that if I have 5 quality, what did I say? 4 quality 3 units, 2 quality 2 units, and 3 quality 1 units, or no, that wouldn't work. Well, actually, that would work. They'd be quality 2. Because even though I have more quality 3 units than anything else, that would give me the advantage. Likewise, if I had, say, 2 quality 3 units, let's say I had a quality 3 unit, a quality 2 unit, and 2 quality 1 units, I could still go down to quality 2 because half my forces is there. Anyway, that's the way it works. Apply any modifier to the force's quality. Due to reductions, it may drop below 0. Firearms. Reduce the quality of the attacking force by 1 if the most defending SPs are infantry with firearms. I'm guessing that means if the majority of the defending SPs have firearms. And in major battles, this is going to take place if the defending force played firearms, and it may have a slightly different, it has a different process, I think. Disruption. Quality of disrupted forces are reduced by 1. Disruption is this thing. Demoralization reduces your movement allowance, and that's indicated on the counter. Road march. Quality is reduced by 1 if you're attacked while in road march. Okay, subtract the defending force's quality from the attacking force's quality and locate the result on the columns of the assault table. Oh boy. Flipping all these charts. All right. So as it says here, quality differential, and you determine whether it's affecting or non-affecting terrain from the terrain effects chart. Which may include multipliers for attacking and defending SPs, affecting, non-affecting row on the assault table. Okay, but I don't know how much strength points matter. Strength point ratio gives a die roll modifier. Great. Okay. Die roll modifiers. All of these are cumulative. The strength point ratio is a ratio between the forces modified strength point forces, the larger force divided by the smaller, and is rounded down to one of the odds shown on the AST. You may never voluntarily reduce the odds. This ends up being a benefit for whatever that force is. It could be positive, it could be negative. Leader, a bonus star gives a bonus. Weather gives a penalty, which is bad for the attacker. Rain, firearms aren't going to be in effect, which means the quality thing in this version. And ambush gives a +4 if you can do it. Okay. Now, optional rule 01.1, combined arms, earthworks, and river are also taken into special effect, and we'll talk about that when we get to the options. Die roll modifier, yeah, we already did this. Okay, whether unit type. Okay, unit type here. So this is Landsknecht and Swiss infantry. +1 if attacking, non-affecting. We have an asterisk there. I don't know what that asterisk means. I don't see it. -1 if defending in a non-affecting hex. It's got 2 asterisks. Modifier supersedes case double star, supersedes case star. Okay, so earthworks are in place here. We'll get to that then. In breach attack gives a -1. A +1 if you're the defender in an in breach attack. I don't know if this makes sense. It's just one die roll, isn't it? Oh boy, I'm having a hell of a time figuring this shit out. Die roll modifiers. All the following modifiers are cumulative. What the fuck do I do? I'm following this procedure, this recipe, and I'm not getting the big image of what happens. Where does it tell me how to fucking roll the die? It doesn't. And this is what confuses me. It says roll the die and modify it by die roll modifiers. So, wait a minute. I take... And what does blue mean? Like I've got different, well, yellow I guess just means nothing. Okay. Blue is for the winner. Brown is for the loser. I was assuming it was attacker, defender, but why do I have +1 and -1? Is it larger and smaller? See, it says add the modifier to the die roll if the attacker is the larger force, subtract if the defender is the larger force. Which to me if I have Landsknecht or Swiss infantry attacking you in a non-affecting hex, I get a bonus. If I'm defending in a non-affecting hex, you get a penalty, right, as the attacker. Likewise, if attacking in an in-breach attack, no, that doesn't make sense. If attacking in an in-breach attack, you get a -1, that makes sense. See, this one makes sense if defending in an in-breach. Well, I guess this is Landsneck and Swiss infantry for all of this. I'm not sure. Unit type. See the description below the assault table in paragraph 13.16. All right, we're gonna have to look at 13.16 because this is structured in a way like I feel like the Landsneck is the affecting non-affecting, but I don't know. Maybe it's the breach as well. It certainly doesn't make sense that it's also earthworks. Some combat unit types have special abilities which may affect combat. These effects are described in the assault table and in the unit effects table. Oh boy. All right, this structuring. I'm getting the feeling that this all only applies if I've got Landsneck and Swiss infantry, which kind of makes sense because Cav would not get a bonus from earthworks. So, okay. So I get a bonus if I'm attacking in a non-affecting hex, and I generate a penalty if I'm defending in it. I get a penalty to attack with Landsneck and Swiss infantry in an in-breach, but a bonus for defending. That feels weird. Not sure why these particularly would be bad at in-breach attacks. If attacking a force with earthworks, I get a -1, but only for Landsneck and Swiss infantry, not for Cav, not for shit like that. That's what's bugging me. Let's take a look. Where's this other choice of things that tells me? See, and in the unit type effects table, here's the unit chart. Unit type effects, infantry with firearms, blah, blah, blah. Landsneck and Swiss infantry. All of these are Landsneck and Swiss infantry. What about the terrain effects chart? Let's take a look at what that helps me with. Let's flip over all these things until I find it. Earthworks. Defender +2 SP, -1 artillery. Yeah. Like, it doesn't look like earthworks are going to affect cavalry. It looks like cavalry are going to be able to smack into a fort without a problem. Did I miss something under siege where, like, I don't count all my strength points? I don't count demoralized ones. I got that. I don't know. Like, and I gotta change batteries. Here it may be that the Cav are dismounting and fighting and that they're a loose order, and the Landsneck, like when I think Landsnecks, I think of guys with big Zweihanders, and I'm pretty sure they're not all that. You know, they're probably in front of a pike unit if I'm thinking correctly there. But yeah, obviously the Swiss are going to be pike. These are heavy formed units that would have trouble dealing with. They get a bonus in non-affecting terrain, makes sense, but they're going to have trouble in attacking against yucky terrain, but a bonus in defending behind it. So I think that's the reasoning there, and that the other units are going to take an effect from the earthworks or from the fortification, of being in affecting terrain, of the enemy getting doubled forces and whatnot. So they're not, they're not taking any bonuses or penalties. These are bonuses and penalties for those heavy formed pike units. And I'm guessing the Landsnecks include pike. Like, are basically a pike formation. It's not the way I think of the term being used, but I may be mistaken. Okay, so where the hell are we? Right then. We're in common combat. So we did unit type. You roll a die. And modify it by die roll modifiers. Great. Artillery SPs. Artillery is never included when determining the SP ratio unless the defending force is entirely artillery SPs. It may then fire as an artillery force in sieges or major battles, but must defend as one SP of infantry as a whole. It may never pursue. During major battles, artillery units do not suffer SP losses from artillery fire unless there's no other type among the bombarded combat units, i.e. no counter battery fire. The cannons were not very precise. Artillery units cannot absorb losses or demoralization from attacks on the assault table unless there's no other unit type among the attack combat units. However, they must pass each required discipline check. I don't know if that just makes them immune. I think it does. But it's not a bad thing. Okay. Affecting terrain. Some types of terrain affect the quality differential column, and that will be handled by this, which looks like a 1-point quality differential, which doesn't seem like a lot, but this is just a die roll, so a die roll modifier. I don't know, I'd have to zone out on this a little bit better than I'm doing. The terrain effects chart states which terrain affects combat. In general, the following are affecting units defending across a bridge, river, hex sides, woods, swamp, mountain, fortified city, and earthworks. That may be different when we get to the optional rules. Fortress effects. A fortress allows a limited number of SPs to double their strength when defending inside. Other terrain effects. Yeah, this is like the doubling and stuff. Leadership bonus. Add to the combat result if the Capitano has a bonus star, or subtract if the defending unit type. Why is this being repeated here? I'm not sure. Didn't we read all this? Leadership bonus. Oh, these are the specifics. Okay. All right. Gotcha. I was, looking at the combat chart and seeing the modifiers there, and they're actually here in the rules as well, but they're deeper down. How to apply? At least half the SP losses must be absorbed by combat units belonging to the quality group used to determine the quality of the force, including any downgraded combat units. Distribute the losses and strength points suffered by a force throughout the combat units and the force as evenly as possible. This seems problematic, but in major battles, combat losses are absorbed by units of the corps involved in the engagements as dictated by the rules in 13.17. That's this. You can't refer to yourself. Major battle optional rule. And those governing the playing of tactical options. Yeah, this is for the option, but here it's basically saying in major battles, combat losses are absorbed by units of the corps involved as dictated by this rule, the one I'm reading. A demoralization result may also be applied to a combat unit not belonging to the quality group used to determine the quality of force. So what's weird here, at least half the SP losses have to be absorbed by units belonging to the quality group. Okay. Distribute losses in strength points suffered by a force throughout the units of the force as evenly as possible. Okay. But remember, I am not allowed, wow, as I dig into this, this is beginning to get really iffy. I may have to start making shit up. Because somewhere or another, it told me I'm not allowed to take losses. Again and again it told me I'm not allowed to take losses. I'm not allowed to take demoralizations on units that took losses. Now, if I have to distribute them as evenly as possible, that's no longer going to create the situation that I thought I was dealing with, which was, okay, I got to take my combat losses on some of my units and maintain enough units to demoralize. So let's take a look at how those losses are spelled out. Where are the casualties spelled out? I'm trying to find it here. Results from the assault table are applied in the following order to the affected force. SP losses, combat units demoralization. These two results may not be applied to the same combat unit. But now here, and that's repeated in everything. Here in the common combat rules, it is saying that I have to take at least half on the combat units belonging to the quality group used to determine the quality of the force. That's fine. Distribute losses in strength points suffered by a force throughout the combat units in the force as evenly as possible. So if I have like 2 units in my force, right, and I get a 2D result, I take a hit on each, and I'm not allowed to demoralize anything by the way I read this, which feels real wrong. One unit of the affected side is immediately demoralized. I'm just not buying it. I'm just not buying that that's what's meant. And we look here as well, roll the die. These are applied in the following order. Fighting forces, SP losses, combat units demoralization. These two results may not be applied to the same combat unit. But I have to spread the SP losses as fully as possible. I feel like the demoralizations, like as much as possible to follow that suggestion, like I have to demoralize units that didn't take losses if possible. But if it's not possible, I think I have to take, I have to take the demoralization result. Otherwise, that is beginning to feel like a real problem. As I said, I'm going to have to make up rolls. All right. So that gets us to executing the retreat. When a combat result requires a force to retreat, it must normally move using its movement allowance. Paying the terrain cost as in normal movement. However, retreat is not movement, and the retreating force does not consider the effects of 8.82 exiting contested hexes, which is the pursuit rules and whatnot. Which feels funny. Don't I have a pursuit anyway? I think I have a different pursuit from the combat, right? Again, though, we have this: all combat units belonging to the attacking or defending force will follow the path of the fighting forces, advancing or retreating. Wow. Yeah, I'm feeling really unhappy with what I'm seeing. Okay, let's keep pushing through and see if I can make any sense out of this. Did I have a pursuit in here somewhere? I do not see a pursuit off of here. I thought there was one. There's pursuit and recovery here in the major battle, but I'm not seeing one in the skirmish. Ruh-roh. right. I don't know, man. A retreating force may not expend movement points other than to retreat. It must stop its retreat if it may stop its retreat if it enters an owned fortress hex. The path of retreat is a path of hexes passed through by the retreating force. The path must conform to priorities of retreat, coming up. Retreating forces may not go through impassable hexes or enter enemy-occupied hexes. If it's blocked, the retreating force retreats as far as possible. If a friendly force cannot retreat and an enemy force remains in the battle hex, the friendly force surrenders and is eliminated. Retreating forces may not attempt to attack from march during the retreat. Yeah, I hope not. The retreat path priorities are given in descending order. This list governs all retreats due to combat and attack from march. Descending priority means that the lower numbered items should be observed first, never broken to accommodate higher numbered items. Okay. Generally, after observing all the following priorities, there will only be a few possible retreat destinations. When retreating force must retreat its full movement allowance, it must end its movement the maximum possible number of hexes away from the hex it began its retreat. That must be observed first. No hex of the path of retreat may be adjacent to more than one hex already passed through, i.e. you can't like double around and shit. The path may be through, it's a good way to express it, even if it seems kind of complex or weird. The path may be through friendly forces without any effect for both forces. The path may include hexes adjacent to enemy forces with no limitation. Retreats, these don't really feel like priorities. These don't feel like limitations at all. They're like, yeah, you're fine. Retreats must be made toward the active friendly supply source or an owned fortress and must shorten the distance between the retreating force and the friendly source or fortress. If two or more paths are open to the retreating force, then it must move along the one that would cost the least movement points. I always find those annoying because you got to calculate out all the retreat paths. All Capitani in a force must retreat together. You may retreat off the map if there's no other alternate path. Forces that retreat off the map are removed from the game and are treated as if captured. Bogus. Retreat out of earthworks. If you're in an earthworks and you're compelled to retreat and leave the hex, the earthworks is destroyed. The enemy forces don't get it. Retreat across rivers. If you cannot retreat through a river hex side, if it would cost 2 or more additional movement points to cross the river. So even a bridge in the rain apparently is dangerous. A force with a garrison order which ends its retreat out of a town or city hex receives a retreat order if it lost a major battle, or a stand order in other cases, like a skirmish. Retreats may also be made towards an owned fortress. Forces that end their retreat in an owned fortress, they may do this regardless of any remaining retreat distance, i.e. they can dump the rest of the retreat. This also applies to forces losing a battle outside a fortress. These forces may retreat inside the fortress, but then they take a discipline check, and probably are like in danger of being sieged. Activated forces with a retreat order follow the same restrictions on movements as forces retreating after combat, with some exceptions. The activated force does consider the effects of 8.82 exiting contested hexes, which can cause a pursuit check, for retreating out of a battle hex. An activated force cannot be entered by an enemy force, so it can never be eliminated in this way. I am really bothered. It feels like skirmishers are not going to cause... I mean, maybe I'm not that bothered, but they're not going to cause a pursuit. Whereas just leaving the hex without having fought a battle first would cause one. Feels weird. An activated force cannot be entered by an enemy force, so it can never be eliminated this way. An activated force cannot be entered by an enemy force. What the fuck does that even mean? Yeah, I don't know. Execute artillery fire. This procedure is used in siege and major battle artillery fire. Demoralized combat units are never considered for neither the attacker or defender for artillery fire. There's just so much wrong with that grammatically. I don't want to parse it. Artillery units sum up their undemoralized SPs and use them to fire 1 siege or 2 for major battle rounds of fire using artillery fire table. Beginning from the attacking player, each player rolls 1 die. The result is implemented in this order: SPs lost, discipline checks, Capitan elimination. Artillery fire is considered simultaneous. Apply the results immediately after firing each round of fire on the artillery fire table. The owning player always selects the specified combat units to absorb fire results, though during major battles, the firing player decides which corps is the target of the artillery fire. Artillery units may suffer SP losses from artillery bombardment, which feels weird because I thought there was somewhere that said they couldn't. That may only be in sieges. Victory phase doesn't really say anything. We go to regional alignment, which is going to cover all these little regions which have their own political alignment within this game. It is time for me to break. I am very frustrated after reading this. I know that I was frustrated when I read it the first time, but I wasn't being as careful. I had some sort of, I'm not sure I got this, but I kind of figured out the things as I got them. But, you know, I put the book down and take a nap in between sections, or I'm reading it in the tub, you know, for like, or on the crapper for a few minutes at a time. So I'm not reading everything contiguously the way I am now. I don't think these combat rules make sense, but I think they come close. The only question is, can I make head nor tail? You know, I feel like I'm making head and tail out of them right now, but I'm not sure it's going to work during play because I'm going to look things up and they're going to contradict with each other. For example, there's the pursuit situation, which really kind of bugs me. It feels like a skirmish prevents a pursuit, and I get to get out of there for free, which maybe is okay, maybe not. I'm not sure how I feel about that. A major battle does have a pursuit. Withdrawing from a hex has a pursuit. But there's indications of an advance after combat type thing that I've seen almost nothing other than like this one rule here. All combat units will follow the path of the fighting forces, advancing or retreating. Yeah, I've seen nothing about advance anywhere else in the rules. That may be like an artifact that isn't supposed to be there. That's how I'm going to treat it. And then I'm going to have to make up shit about, you know, how to make this work, where you're taking hits against every unit. I'm going to make up that, yeah, you still take that demoralization result on a unit. Now, where it says 2D, what is that saying? 1 unit is demoralized, yeah. So you have to prefer units that didn't take casualties, but you still take that demoralization. Now, a D is just a single D, so you're probably not going to get your whole force demoralized. Well, I mean, you might be just a baronial force, in which case, yeah, you will. But you're probably not going to, you know, with major battles and whatnot, you're not going to get the force demoralized off of like a hit from here. And if there are a number of combat units, you know, the worst you can take is like a 4D. Well, that would be each of these takes a hit. And in the case of the Turks here, they would still have another unit that could get demoralized, except I think the artillery are immune to both. So, yeah, they actually wouldn't. Anyway, it's break time. Regional alignment, let's see where we are. 32 actual pages of rules. I'm trying to decide. I mean, I want to get the main game, which is 26 pages of rules total. We're almost at the end of that. And then maybe do one on the optional rules, although I am going to be playing with them. This had always been one of my considerations, is do I want to segment the optional combat rules, which aren't very big. Again, it's like 6 pages, but you wouldn't need to play with them. But maybe the combat system, I don't think so. I was going to say, maybe it'll make more sense under that, but I don't think it will. All right. But maybe, I don't know. Again, I don't think, it's only for the major battles, and things like the advance after combat rule that's hinted at, that doesn't seem to exist otherwise, wouldn't be in there. Because it was referred to under skirmishes, not under the advance, not under the major battle. I don't know. All right, the map's divided into the 12 ancient states of the Kingdom of Naples and the papal states around Rome, some of them. The papal states are represented by the Lazio region only and the city of Benevento. Where's Rome? I'm looking for Benevento. It's not, I'm not really familiar with where it would be. This is Lazio. Here. I would expect Benevento to be somewhere near there. Or to be really big. I don't know. It should be a city. Well, I am not seeing it. So, I don't know. All right. Well, whatever. I don't think it's of that much importance. These are not part of the Kingdom of Naples. They're always non-aligned, and players can never conquer nor pillage their towns or cities. Cities? Each of these states is called a region in game terms. Again, I mean, if I run into it, I'll worry about it, but I do not see it. A region can be in one of following alignments, either aligned or non-aligned. In addition, if a region is aligned with one side, it's hostile to the opposing sides. Non-aligned regions are neither aligned nor hostile to any side. Scenario instructions specify regional alignment and events that may trigger changes. When regional alignment switches to either side, from not aligned to one side or from one side to the other, that side immediately gains ownership of all fortresses except those that are occupied in that moment by an enemy force, which remain owned by the enemy side. Note that a supply source marker alone in a hex does not occupy the hex in the previous terms, and it does not prevent the switch of a regional alignment. However, it can continue to operate as a supply source, perhaps. Forces in hostile regions suffer attrition. Forces may freely enter in combat, may take place in regions with any kind of alignment status. A friendly line of communication or command path may be freely traced through a region of any alignment status, but they may not be traced through fortresses owned by the enemy side. Each side owns all towns and cities in aligned regions except those that are conquered by the enemy side. Each side also owns all towns and cities in non-aligned or hostile regions which are conquered by his side. Towns and cities change ownership if unoccupied when the belonging region changes alignment or when conquered. Town and cities in non-aligned regions are not owned by either side until they are conquered by either side. A fortress hex which contains no enemy force is conquered when a friendly force enters the hex and spends an additional movement point, passing through is not enough, and ends its movement in the hex or ends its movement in the hex or after a successful combat. All fortresses may be conquered. Place a conquered marker on the fortress of the color of the Primo Capitano, which commands the force conquering it. By default, a fortress with no conquered marker is owned by the side to which the region is aligned. Scenario instructions will specify this. Conquering a town, which is only relevant in some scenarios, is similar to conquering a fortress, except that no additional MP movement points is expended to conquer the town during movement. You can just walk through it and you own it. Some special military units. Engineers, siege artillery, and pontoon bridges. And in this first scenario, we're going to have two of the three. Field engineers, siege artillery, and pontoon bridges are auxiliary units. These are placed on the card of the Capitano, to whom they are subordinate. I guess they could be put in the subordinate space, but that's kind of ran out of room. They're not counted toward the limit of combat units dictated by rank. They always remain subordinate in the subordinate Capitani box. They may be transferred to another Capitano during a command phase only if the resulting force has at least one SP, and they're treated as combat units when the Capitano commanding them is eliminated. Siege artillery and field engineers may affect only siege combat. They cannot take part in any other way to other types of combat. Siege artillery, field engineers, and pontoon bridges cannot be used to absorb losses or other combat results or attrition losses. Field engineers in defense. If a besieged force has field engineers, they can try to lower the siege status level. The force may have any order. At the end of an activation, in addition to other undertaken action, the besieged player rolls a die. On a 5 or 6, the siege level drops by 1 level to a minimum of 0. However, if the roll is 1, the field engineers kill themselves. It's just too big a task. In attack, if the besieging player has field engineers, he can use them to improve the force's artillery fire. Roll a die. If the roll is 5 or 6, add 2 artillery strength points when determining the column on the artillery fire table. On a 1, they die. Siege artillery. Siege artillery is a marker. It remains with the force until this latter has at least 1 artillery SP. I don't know what that means. I have an SP on this. Siege artillery may not be transferred to a force without artillery. Oh, okay. I guess it can just like be a notional type of thing. Siege artillery helps in sieges, and its effects are detailed under the artillery fire table. And I don't know what those effects are. Kind of wish they told me. So now I go flipping through all these tables, looking for, there we go. What does siege artillery do? The Capitano in the firing force has siege ability special feature. That's not it. Yeah. Well, this isn't cool. I do not see them on the artillery firing table. Is that where I'm supposed to be again? Its effects are detailed under the artillery firing table. Oh, gosh. Are they? Oh. Yeah, if you have a parenthesized B, it allows you to get a breach. Okay. So they are. I kind of wish they just told me that instead of saying it's under the table. Like, it can be in both places. Other types of terrain affect combat in the manner described in the terrain effects chart. What the fuck? Okay. Pontoon bridges. Never mind. It costs 1 movement point to deploy a pontoon bridge. Place the bridge marker on the hex occupied by the deploying force, pointing towards the desired hex side. Pontoon bridges may only be deployed, not dismantled, destroyed, or captured. A pontoon bridge may be deployed only if available in the initial setup and may not be deployed if an enemy force occupies the opposite hex adjacent to the bridge. Once a pontoon is deployed, it can be used by both players, and I think it's just covered on the terrain effects chart. I think it's not as good. Let's see. Pontoon bridge is better than a bridge. Interesting. It's just good. Well, that's weird. F. Yeah, that's really interesting. You wouldn't be getting the road movement bonus, I guess. I don't know. All right. Infantry units with firearms. Some of the units have red on their strength points. Now, I don't know if any in this game do, in this scenario do. I do not see any. In other scenarios, we're going to see them, but this is the earliest of the scenarios. Spanish, French, and Italians. The advantages of firearms are described in the game charts and tables. Helpful. Barons. There are some barons. On the other side, they have a purple version. This is the sort of pro-Spanish or Aragonese or Neapolitan version, and the other side is the pro-French version. The real power was in the hands of local potentates, not prostitutes, with a strong influence on the nearby population. Many of them were barons, but also other titles. Yeah, okay. Barons are represented by baron units. You use double-sided units. Each side has their own. Controlled baron can be either as a force or as its own combat unit. When it's not consolidated into another force, it's a special autonomous minor force with the initiative printed on the counter, no rank, and an implicit unique combat unit of 1 infantry SP, unless specified on the counter where it'll say 2x for 2 SP. I think these are all not, but I'm not sure because this is a particularly rich area. Wow, they have quality 0, I guess. The little quality shield here. With no firearms, the troop quality of this SP is printed on the counter. The reliability class is not printed. It will always be normal. Baron units' movement allowance is 5 movement points. When activated as autonomous forces, the Baron units must be issued orders just like other forces on the map. Put an order under the Baron counter on the map. During any command phase, each player can issue orders to a number of allied barons up to the number of friendly capitani, excluding unemployed and minor capitani, and of course baron forces, already on the map with a minimum of 2 baron forces. When treated like autonomous forces, barons pay 0 APs for orders, regardless of how many SPs are composed. I mean, it's 1 or 2. And while they remain in their state's territory, they're considered in supply, and in the combat phase, they do not check for attrition, nor can they suffer attrition losses. Outside their home territory, they're normal forces. They must receive an order. They still don't pay for it, with a valid command path to the Capitano General of their side, and are subject to attrition. When consolidated into a force, a minor or major force, barons are treated in all respects as other combat units. They can never be subordinate forces. Initiative rating is disregarded in this case. A baron unit which takes an SP loss or demoralization for any reason is eliminated, regardless of its actual strength, but it can be brought back into play. A baron can be dropped off by a force during its movement or command phase, and from that moment it's treated like an autonomous force. Scenario instructions specify states alignment at the start of the scenario, how many barons each state produces, and which barons of this total are controlled by each side and where they're deployed. The difference between the total number of barons produced by a state and the total number of barons on the map at start in that state is the number of available barons, which will be placed in these little spaces for each region. They consider it a state card. I would rather call it a box. Scenario instruction special rules describe specific conditions by which they can be obtained. At scheduled turns indicated, and I think that's the crowns on the track. One of the available Baron units in each state can be brought into play in the same state. They will be controlled by the player to whom the state is currently aligned. Eliminated Barons are placed on the corresponding state box on the map as available. Obtained Baron units can immediately be placed in their belonging state in eligible city or town hexes, 1 unit per hex. There are not enough eligible hexes. The excesses cannot be deployed. To be eligible, the hex must be owned. It must be empty or occupied by a friendly force which can absorb the Baron. A Baron unit of aligned states may act as autonomous forces by the controlling player when on the map, or can be consolidated into a friendly force, which will then use them in combat units. Barons in non-aligned states are placed randomly in any eligible hex, but respecting priorities: fortified city, fortified town, town. Non-aligned barons cannot be moved or consolidated in friendly forces by either player, nor they may attack, though they defend always inside the fortress when possible if attacked. They're always in supply, and if eliminated, they cannot be replaced. If their belonging region becomes aligned, they're removed from play, but maybe they come back, as aligned barons. Specific generic non-aligned baron unit counters are provided, and they look like that. And I need to swap batteries. Tactical units. Spanish light cavalry. A force completely composed of Spanish light cavalry units have the option to retreat before combat after step 2 of the combat sequence using its full movement allowance. The opponent cannot pursue in this case. Ambush. Any force whose primo capitano is a Spanish, and any baron force, provided these forces have an attack order, is ambush capable. Anytime a force moves into a hex adjacent to an ambush capable force to another adjacent hex, from a hex adjacent to it, to another adjacent hex of the same force, the ambush capable force may declare an attack in the second hex. The attacking force is automatically moved, regardless of other forces or any terrain or hex side, unless the hex side crossed is impassable, into the enemy hex, and a skirmish combat is immediately executed where the ambushing force is the attacker. Resolve the ambush combat always as a skirmish, even if conditions for other battle procedures should exist. Okay. I guess. An ambushing force can leave a contested hex, but in doing so it will suffer a pursuit, and it cannot use movement points to modify the pursuit die roll. The particular type of combat will benefit by +4 on the assault table in addition to any standard modifier exception. Disregard the presence of other forces or fortresses in the hex, but take into account other terrain. Okay. There was something that seemed to indicate you couldn't do this, whereas the ambush, you couldn't move, you couldn't ambush into a hex. I don't remember what it was. It may actually be this 13.22, no, 8.8.21, but I don't think that was it. Yeah, that was not it, but it's close. Oh, geez. Because I know I saw this really. A force entering an enemy-occupied hex must stop. There's something that, you couldn't leave an enemy-occupied hex, a contested hex. Yeah, here it is. And go into an immediate another hex that would be contested. And I'm assuming again that it's a strict, it's just straight up a contradiction, and given that, ambushing is a sort of a special rule, I'm going to give it preference for that particular case. Fortresses. Only cities and towns on the map that have an effect on the game are fortresses. There are named towns on the map. There are named towns on the map that are not fortified, but they have minimal effect on play. Some scenarios. Relevant citadels and castles on the map are fortified towns. A limited number of strength points, 2 for a fortified town, 4 for a city, are doubled when the force defends inside of it. For example, in a fortified town hex, a 3 SP force would defend at 5, while a 6 SP would defend at 8. Yeah, okay. During in-breach attacks, forces inside a fortress will benefit from both the fortress effects and the other terrain in the hex, while forces conducting sortie attacks use only the other terrain in the hex. And they wouldn't be benefiting from it because they're attacking. Besieged forces. A force is considered besieged if it has a siege status marker on it. Besieged forces can receive APs and orders if they can trace a valid LOC command path. While a force is besieged, it remains inside the fortress and no other force may enter. A besieged force may try to exit the hex by a standard procedure, but it cannot combat outside the fortress during a sortie. The force remains inside the fortress, technically. Sort of, kind of. For Rule 12.31, declaring a siege, the force remains besieged even if attacking out of the fortress. Each turn at the end of combat and attrition, each besieged force has to roll. If it has no line of communication, it suffers a +2 penalty. A besieged force will automatically surrender at the end of any combat and attrition phase in which all of its combat units are demoralized. Or if it's... yeah. Okay. Winter quarters. Each of a player's forces may either be on campaign or in quarters. A force is normally considered on campaign unless otherwise specified. During the command phase, each player can declare any force or forces of his army with a stand or garrison order to enter quarters. There's no cost for this. The force enters quarters immediately. Put a marker indicating that. Once declared in quarters, a force remains in quarters until it again goes on campaign. In order to be in quarters, a force must be in a fortress or earthworks. A force without a line of communication or command path is not automatically prevented from entering quarters. A besieged force may not enter quarters. A besieging force may enter quarters, but in doing so, the siege is broken and the siege status level is removed. And then the other side can go into quarters too. Nothing against you being in a contested hex. Okay, effects of quarters on movement. They may not voluntarily move. They may recover and expend movement points to build earthworks. On combat, they may not attack. If attacked, the quality is reduced by 1 in addition to any other modifier. And at the end of the combat, they become on campaign. When attacked, forces in quarters resolve any kind of combat normally. On attrition, they will benefit for being in quarters when calculating attrition. There's a -1 modifier to the attrition roll if a force is in quarters in a fortified town or earthworks. The modifier is -2 when in a fortified city, regardless of earthworks. Discipline. Demoralization does not prevent a force from entering quarters. Discipline recovery checks and results implemented are made as if on campaign. Command. Forces on campaigns may not consolidate with forces in quarters. A player may change the status of his force to on campaign during any command phase. There's no cost to do this. You simply declare it's on campaign. If a force is attacked or unable to fulfill requirements for entering quarters, it's placed on campaign. It says immediately, not exactly, because its quality is reduced for the attack first. I gotta check that battery. I don't trust that it's done, and then we'll keep going. We don't have much more. Malaria Italica. I'm assuming that's Italian miles, essentially, which probably have nothing to do with like imperial or English miles. It's just interesting. Okay, pillaging. During an activation phase, a force composed of at least 2 SP of infantry or cavalry, but not a baron, may enter a fortress hex free of enemy forces in order to pillage it. Pillaging costs 2 movement points and grants some advantages and disadvantages. After expending the extra MPs, the pillaging force rolls a die. The die result is divided by 2 if the hex is a fortified town. The result is the amount of APs which can be added to the army's accumulated admin points. I don't know if you need an LOC for this. Place a pillaged marker on the hex as a reminder. After that, the force may make a recovery check to restore some units from demoralization. Then the force becomes disrupted. It is feasible to pillage also a fortress in friendly aligned or non-aligned state. If you do this, the alignment of the state switches to the side opposed to that of the pillaging force. Probably not a good idea. A hex may be pillaged as a result of a battle or following a successful siege. The force does not have to expend 2 extra movement points in this case. During the game, due to discipline check results, a force may be required to pillage D stars. An unbesieged minor... Yeah, the land's next in Rome. An unbesieged minor force containing a combat unit affected by a D-star, regardless of orders or zone of control, is immediately displaced, flies to the nearest unoccupied fortress hex, and pillages it. It may not fly through impassable hex sides or other units. If it cannot reach an eligible hex, it remains where it is without further effect. If 2 or more fortresses are equidistant, select randomly. A combat unit belonging to a major force or any kind of besieged force affected by a D-star is eliminated instead. That's a pretty big effect, right? It just dissolves. A hex may be pillaged only once during a game. Once placed, a pillaged marker is never removed. Towns can also be pillaged. The procedure and consequences are similar to fortresses, but you only get 1 AP. Okay. Regia Dogana della Mena della Procura. Or how to use your sheep. Some hexes on the map represent what I just said, RDMP, Royal Customs for the Transhumans of Sheep. Now, I don't know how you make sheep transhumans, but I don't know. There's 3 of them, and we can see them all. During the game turns of October and May, in which there are sheep, there's two turns in each of those months. The side owning at least 2 of these hexes, while the enemy side does not own any, controls this, and during the administrative segment of the game turns indicated, gets 1 additional AP per game turn for every region adjacent to the Capitanta, which is aligned to the player controlling the RDMP. I don't know what a Capitanta is. Receives 1 additional for every region adjacent to the Capitanta. Is that what this area is? That's what the area is called. Okay. All right. Which is aligned to the player controlling the RDMP. These APs are actual and not nominal. That means you don't have to roll on the AP table for them. You just get the additional APs, just like you would with pillaging. Now, adjacent is kind of interesting. Like here it says, example, they control it in Moise Principato and Basilicata. They don't talk about Capitanta itself. I think we're going to go with strictly adjacent. Like you need to control the sheep and you need to control someplace where you can send the wool to give you the extra points. And this is by scenario. And then we have a picture of Raphael and some information. His tomb. All right, we're going to leave the optional rules. I'm going to do that as an extra little thing because this has gone long enough. This is the core of the game. However, the major battles are going to be addressed in a slightly different way than we handled or we already discussed. A little bit more complicated, and instead of just using this, you use this when a major battle is going on. And basically the vanguard is able to fight the vanguard, the main body fights the main body, the rear guards hold off. And it's done on a core by core basis. So how did the main battle work in the base rules? I should probably go into this when we hit the other. But yeah, so in the base rules, you do pair off the different Capitano and attack, basically one core against one core for the most part, although it could be one to many or many to one, but it's not many to many. But here we've got more details as to how you position the forces on this little field, but you also have secret selection of chits. Now the big question is, am I going to, because it's secret selection and all that, is it going to work for me solo? Probably, but it might also just work out to be too much effort to be worthwhile. I remember in the volume 1 of the series feeling like the combat system was a little too cumbersome. It already feels cumbersome, and there's some big questions. But anyway, we'll get to that shortly. I gotta go play Raid. I gotta load this up for you. And, well, we'll see. We'll see when I get back.